in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, at 11:47 p.m. A call was secretly recorded. During that conversation, Jennifer confessed to her lover that she had killed her husband, Matthew. From that moment on, the truth about a seemingly perfect marriage began to emerge, leading to one of the most shocking family crimes in Utah. Jennifer Gledhill and Matthew Johnson seemed to have it all. Living in their million-dollar home in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, they appeared to be the perfect family, a devoted military husband and a caring mother, raising their 3 children, aged 11, 7, and 5. Matthew, 51, was a respected member of the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group. Known for his reliability and brilliance, his fellow soldiers said he was the kind of man they could always count on for answers. Jennifer, 42, was seen as a devoted mother and supportive military wife, whom many of Matthew's friends described as nice and rather reclusive, but beneath the surface, their marriage had begun to fracture months earlier. In August 2024, Jennifer filed for a temporary protective order against Matthew, claiming she needed protection from him. Yet, when the case reached 3rd District Commissioner Russell Minus, he dismissed the request. The commissioner noted that text messages from Jennifer to Matthew were repeatedly berating, belittling, and demeaning, if not outright attempts, to goad him into a violent response on the 16th of September, 2024, just days before the tragedy that would shatter their family forever. Commissioner Minus dismissed the protective order, ruling that no abuse had occurred. In the weeks leading up to September, Matthew's friends noticed changes. Jennifer's behavior had become so erratic that Matthew sometimes stayed overnight at a National Guard facility, telling those close to him that he feared for his safety. In one of his final conversations with a longtime friend, retired Guardsman Kevin Thompson, Matthew said he was ready to move on and file for divorce. Behind his back, Jennifer was living a double life. She was deeply involved in an affair with another man, an affair so intense that it consumed her thoughts. On the 19th of September, just days before Matthew's death, Jennifer showed her lover a loaded Glock 19X she kept in the home. At the time, he brushed it off. Firearms weren't unusual in a military family, but prosecutors later argued this was part of a calculated plan. She had arranged for their 3 children to stay at her parents' house the night she planned to kill Matthew. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would end in tragedy. The 20th of September, 2024, began like any other day. But by evening, the fragile facade of the marriage would finally crumble. Matthew had discovered the truth about his wife's affair, and witnesses would later report hearing a heated argument between the couple that night. According to Jennifer's later confession, Matthew confronted her, yelling because he knew she had been sleeping with someone else. The argument was intense, years of marital problems finally exploding into the open. What happened next would haunt everyone who learned about it. In the early hours of the 21st of September, 2024, as Matthew lay sleeping in their master bedroom, completely vulnerable and unaware of the danger, Jennifer made a decision that would destroy him forever. She took his own 9mm handgun and shot him in the head while he slept. By her own confession, she then put Matthew's body into a rooftop storage container, sliding it down the stairs of their home before loading it into the back of their minivan. She smashed his phone and drove his truck to a nearby neighborhood, abandoning it blocks from their home. Then, in what can only be described as a methodical cover-up, Jennifer drove north with her husband's body and buried him in a shallow grave at a location that remains unknown to this day. When she returned home, she began an extensive cleanup operation. She bleached the walls, used carpet cleaning supplies throughout the master bedroom, and ordered a new mattress to replace the blood-soaked one where Matthew had been killed. The mattress arrived just 2 days later, but Jennifer's most critical mistake was yet to come. On the 22nd of September, just before midnight, Jennifer showed up at her lover's home and made a confession that would ultimately lead to her arrest. She told him everything: how she had killed Matthew, how she had disposed of his body, and how she had cleaned up the crime scene. The man noticed bruises on Jennifer's body during their conversation, and when he asked about them, she casually explained that she had gotten them while burying her husband and cleaning the house of evidence. Her lover was terrified by what he had heard. Jennifer, whom he thought he knew, had just confessed to cold-blooded murder with an almost casual demeanor. The truth was about to come out, and it was worse than anyone imagined. Jennifer's lover was so disturbed by her confession that he decided to record their next phone conversation. When he told Jennifer that he was frightened by what she had told him, her response was chilling and would become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the case. She exclaimed that she thinks she could even hurt a fly, and said that Matthew's not a person. He wasn't a person anymore. The cold detachment in her voice was unmistakable. She had dehumanized her husband so completely that his death meant nothing to her. But Jennifer's disturbing revelations didn't stop there. When her lover asked if she would do anything differently if she could turn back time, Jennifer replied, no. She also asked her lover not to think of her as a monster and to remember who she was before the confession. The irony was not lost. She was asking for understanding after confessing to murdering the father of her children in cold blood. What made this conversation even more significant was that it took place before Matthew was officially reported missing. Jennifer was already referring to her husband in the past tense. Even though no one else knew he was dead, 6 days after confessing to her lover, Jennifer finally reported Matthew missing to the police. She told them that Matthew had said he would be gone for a week and instructed her not to call him. Meanwhile, the Utah National Guard had already begun searching for Matthew when he failed to report for duty on the 23rd of September. Unbeknownst to Jennifer, her lover had been collecting evidence against her, including screenshots of their text messages and recordings of their phone conversations. On the 2nd of October, 2024, he contacted the police with information that would crack the case wide open. On the 2nd of October, 2024, armed with the recorded confessions and physical evidence, police arrested Jennifer Gledhill on charges of first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. When Cottonwood Heights, Utah police executed a search warrant on the Gledhill home. They discovered a scene that told a very different story than the one Jennifer had presented. In the master bedroom, investigators found a large blood-stained spot on the carpet beneath the bed. Blood was also found on the bed frame slats, which corroborated Jennifer's confession to her lover. The house reeked of bleach, and there were reddish-brown stains on the walls, bed frame, and blinds. Tellingly, the mattress in the bedroom was brand new. Phone records later revealed that Jennifer had ordered it on the 24th of September, just 3 days after the murder. It had been delivered 2 days later. During the investigation, police also discovered GPS data from Jennifer's phone showing her movements on the 21st of September and 22nd. The data showed her traveling to the location where Matthew's truck was found at around 6 o'clock a.m., and later tracking her journey north toward Davis County, exactly where she claimed to have buried his body. But the investigation was far from over. On the 24th of October, 2024, Jennifer's parents, Thomas Gledhill, 71, and Rosalie Gledhill, 68, were also arrested and charged with 4 counts of obstruction of justice. Police discovered that they had spent over 5 hours at Jennifer's house in late September. Despite initially claiming they were only there for less than an hour to pick up clothing, investigators found that Rosalie had purchased the new mattress and had her phone remotely reset, erasing all data about her whereabouts during the cleanup period. When police questioned Thomas about the master bedroom and the alleged cleanup, he said he did not go in where the incident happened, inadvertently revealing knowledge of a crime scene. During a search of Jennifer's parents' home, police found a Glock 19X gun box wrapped in a child's onesie inside a plastic tote near Jennifer's bedroom. The container matched the description of the gun Jennifer had shown to her lover on the 19th of September. The family had tried to cover up the perfect murder, but their web of lies was quickly unraveling. Months have passed since Jennifer's arrest, but Matthew Johnson's body remains missing. Extensive search efforts have covered multiple counties, extending from Davis counties all the way to Box Elder County near the Utah border. Over 70 searchers have participated in the ongoing efforts to find Matthew, including law enforcement, volunteers, and Matthew's own military friends who have organized their own search parties. As his friend Kevin Thompson said, "The fact that the search is now in its 5th month keeps them up at night." John Hash, Matthew's fellow Green Beret, who served with him for 12 years, has been frustrated by the ongoing search efforts. He said, having had Jennifer in his home before, breaking bread with them, it turned out she's responsible for Matthew's death. It was shocking. Frankly, during recent court hearings, prosecutors revealed that a vehicle storage container had been found floating in water and it contained Matthew's blood inside. This discovery provided additional physical evidence linking Jennifer to the crime, but Matthew's body still hasn't been recovered. The search continues to expand across northern Utah as investigators follow every lead, hoping to finally bring Matthew home to his family. They were about to discover a secret Jennifer had hoped would never see the light of day. Jennifer Gledhill has pleaded not guilty to all charges against her. She faces 1 count of first-degree murder, 5 counts of obstruction of justice, 1 count of possession of a controlled substance, 1 count of abuse or desecration of a human body, and 1 count of tampering with a witness. During her bail hearing, prosecutors argued that Jennifer posed a significant danger to the community and to the integrity of the investigation. They revealed that she had told her lover she would shoot herself rather than go to jail, demonstrating both her desperation and potential for further violence. The judge sided with the prosecutors and denied Jennifer's request for bail, noting the risk she posed to the community. She remains in custody at the Salt Lake County Jail. Adding another layer of complexity to the case is the matter of Matthew's $500,000 Credential life insurance policy, with Jennifer named as the beneficiary. Because Jennifer is facing murder charges and Matthew's body is still missing, Credential has asked the court to determine who should receive the money. Jennifer's trial is scheduled to begin on the 8th of December, 2025, and is expected to last 8 days. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case is the plight of the 3 children who have lost both parents, 1 to murder and 1 to imprisonment. Matthew Johnson's family has released a statement through their victim representative saying they are hopeful that they will find Matthew soon, or that Jennifer or someone will come forward with the location of his body so they can properly lay him to rest. The prosecution's theory is straightforward but chilling. Jennifer Gledhill killed her husband because he discovered her affair, and she wanted to be free to pursue her relationship with her lover rather than go through a messy divorce that might have resulted in shared custody and financial obligations. She chose murder. As we await Jennifer Gledhill's trial in December 2025, one question haunts everyone involved in this case. How does a mother of 3 justify destroying so many lives for the sake of an affair? Perhaps we'll never fully understand the depths of her selfishness and cruelty. What we do know is that her actions have created wounds that will never fully heal. Justice may eventually be served, but Matthew Johnson will never come home to his children, and somewhere in northern Utah, a devoted father and soldier lies in an unmarked grave, waiting for someone to finally tell the truth about where he can be found. Luisa Fernanda Garces Perez was born in Villa Maria. Luisa had a younger brother who was 2 years her junior. The siblings were very close, communicated well, and supported each other from a young age. Their father, Giovanni Garces, frequently worked long hours in warehouses, often taking night shifts to provide for the family. He often came home early in the morning, slept until the evening, and then returned to work. Despite the exhausting nature of his job, Giovanni always made time for his family. Luisa's mother primarily focused on managing the household and caring for her children instead of working outside the home. The grandparents, particularly on the father's side, played a significant role in their lives. Since they lived nearby, the children frequently visited and often stayed overnight. People who knew Luisa well described her as kind, intelligent, and lively. She was dedicated and responsible in her studies, earning good grades in all her subjects. Luisa was convinced that her academic success would lead to a brighter future and a more comfortable life than her parents had. Luisa was very sociable and had formed strong friendships with her classmates. They spent a lot of time together, studying and enjoying their free time. The group had always been close. However, in January 2014, things started to change. Many people noticed that Luisa began to distance herself from her friends. She went from being active and friendly to feeling irritated, even aggressive. It seemed like she was constantly looking for reasons to argue. Some thought this behavior was just a typical part of her teenage years. However, her conflicts with classmates increased, and she started to challenge her teacher's authority, creating many problems in her class. This was a sharp contrast to her previous compliant behavior. In July 2014, the school administration reached out to Luisa's family to recommend her removal from the school because of her disruptive behavior and the negative impact she was having on her classmates. Luisa, who had previously been a dedicated student, started to struggle in most subjects and underwent significant changes in her behavior. Her family attempted to communicate with her to understand what was happening, but Luisa remained distant and emotionally unavailable, unwilling to talk or share the reasons for her sudden transformation. Luisa's father was very worried. He tried several times to talk to her openly to figure out what was going on. He couldn't help but remember his kind and cheerful daughter, who now seemed so serious and rarely smiled. Even her father, who was once very close to her, couldn't reach her. She stubbornly refused to open up. Ultimately, Giovanni had to accept that this behavior was simply a part of her adolescence and hormonal changes. By August 2014, her parents had been divorced for 8 months. The primary issue in their marriage was her mother's struggle with alcohol. Her father also suspected that her mother was unfaithful and was often drunk, acted irresponsibly towards their children. As a result, after the divorce, Giovanni took responsibility for their daughter Luisa and her younger brother, raising them as a single father while their mother moved to another city to start a new life. Giovanni was concerned when the situation did not improve, so he thought a change of scenery might help. He contacted his sister, Maria, who lived in a nearby city. Maria agreed to take Luisa in for a while. At first, she frequently called Giovanni to report that Luisa was doing well and her behavior had improved a bit. However, once Luisa settled into the new environment, she became more withdrawn and aggressive again, suspecting something was wrong. Maria reached out to social services for help. A psychologist assessed Luisa and later informed Maria of distressing news. He believed the girl's mental state suggested she might have been abused. Maria was taken aback and immediately called Giovanni to share this information. Giovanni was shocked by the news from the social worker. Although he did not want to believe that his daughter could be a victim of abuse, he recognized that her behavior aligned with signs of such trauma. Luisa's mother remained calm and reserved, but Giovanni was deeply worried about his daughter. He wanted to understand how this could happen and who might be involved. Now, he felt compelled to investigate whether the social worker's claim was true. Initially, he spoke with his sister and concluded that he needed to have a direct conversation with his daughter. After a short time, on August 19, 2014, Luisa came back to her father. they faced a tough discussion. Giovanni chose to be straightforward and immediately asked if she had been abused. Luisa could not speak and started to cry, which made her father realize the truth. All of the hurt, anger, and frustration that Luisa had been carrying came pouring out. She didn't share every detail, but according to Luisa, at the end of January 2014, when her father left for his night shift again, a friend of her mother came to visit. The two women began to drink together. Soon after, a man whom Luisa had never met arrived. He brought more alcohol and acted as if he were familiar with everyone. They welcomed him joyfully. Soon, they were all drinking together. When the alcohol was gone, two women fell asleep on the sofas, having consumed too much, while the stranger remained upright, noticeably less intoxicated than the others. He turned to Luisa and her brother, suggested they go to a nearby tent to eat hot dogs. They were easily convinced and happily followed the man to the closest eatery. They trusted him because they had seen their mother speak to him calmly and openly. After enjoying their hot dogs, they returned home. Two women were still asleep on the sofas. Since it was late in the evening, the children were also ready for bed. As soon as they got back inside, they went straight to their bedroom. Almost immediately, the man walked into the room. He offered Luisa's brother 50,000 Colombian pesos, which was a day's wages at that time, and a tempting offer for the young boy, told him to go to bed with his mother. Not realizing the man's true intentions, Luisa's brother took the money and followed his instructions to leave the room. The man then warned him not to come back for any reason. Luckily, Luisa's brother found it difficult to sleep. A few minutes later, Luisa's brother heard his sister crying softly from the children's bedroom. When he went back into the room, he was shocked to find the man in bed with Luisa. Confused and unsure of what to do, the boy hesitated. Luisa quickly panicked and chased him away. In an odd turn of events, their mother slept so deeply that she didn't wake up to check on the children. Despite the noise, Luisa asked her brother not to share what had happened because she was worried about the consequences. They both kept this painful secret for several months. Luisa's brother was still young and didn't fully grasp the situation. Luisa chose not to discuss any details because she was consumed by her own pain and anger. After this incident, Giovanni finally understood his daughter's behavior. He realized why she had become so withdrawn and aggressive during that time. Naturally, he was furious with his ex-wife for letting a stranger be in the house with their children while he was at work. Giovanni felt she had contributed to the attack on their daughter. He was terrified to think about what could have happened if his son hadn't woken up and scared away the attacker. The children had been at risk that whole evening. However, Giovanni quickly called his ex-wife to tell her what had happened and to blame her for it. She defended herself, saying she had no idea anything like this would happen. She stated that she didn't even know the man's name since he wasn't a close friend. The group had only met a few times. Giovanni realized that his ex-wife was merely covering for the criminal, which was an even greater blow to him. After recovering from the shock, Giovanni was determined to confront the situation. He took Luisa for a medical checkup to ensure her health and officially document the attack so they could report it to the police. He filed a report with the police and then returned home. Now, they awaited updates from law enforcement, hoping to see the perpetrator brought to justice soon. The next day, August 20th, 2014, Giovanni started his usual night shift at the warehouse. After these shifts, he was always exhausted and went straight to bed. That morning was no different. He saw his daughter doing her homework, and they exchanged a few words before he told her he was going to sleep since he needed to rest. This meant he would wake up around 7 or 8 p.m. During this time, Luisa was on her own, but her grandparents often visited her. She usually found activities to keep herself occupied and stayed at home. When Giovanni woke up, he noticed that Luisa was not there. He wasn't overly worried at first, thinking she might be at his parents' house nearby. Giovanni headed to work for his night shift and decided to call his father to check on Luisa. However, his father informed him that he had not seen her. She had visited them in the morning, but had returned home afterward. This news made Giovanni anxious. To avoid panicking, He reached out to friends and family who might know her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. Additionally, Luisa's brother spent the entire day with their grandfather, which increased their concern. Giovanni took a leave of absence from work and, along with his parents, started searching for his daughter. They were very concerned, believing that Luisa was still in danger. On August 21, 2014, after a long night of searching without success, they returned to the police station to report their child's disappearance. As soon as they filed the report, a public announcement was made and many flyers were printed. Pictures of Luisa, along with her description and details about her disappearance, were distributed around the city to seek information. On the same day, witnesses reported seeing Luisa in various cities. Some said she was wandering the streets, while others claimed she was with a group of men. This news was concerning, but also offered a glimmer of hope. Sadly, subsequent searches turned up nothing. Giovanni's anxiety grew with each passing moment. He struggled to eat or sleep, consumed by worry for his daughter's safety. Law enforcement did not stay idle. As soon as they received the report, they started searching for Luisa right away. The detectives treated the situation with great seriousness, particularly because of the abuse allegation. It felt too coincidental. The day before the attack, the girl had gone to the hospital, where the abuse was confirmed. This led to concerns that the attacker might have tried to silence her to prevent her from testifying in court. But how could he have learned about her so quickly? Unfortunately, no one knew the identity or address of the man. There was very little information about the abuser. However, a few individuals could provide more insights. The police reached out to Luisa's mother's friend. She told the detectives that in early January, she and Luisa's mother had enjoyed some beers together after work. During their time together, she received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, she felt at ease upon recognizing the voice of a young hairdresser she had met about 7 years earlier. Based on their conversation, he expressed a desire to meet and talk with them, offering to bring alcohol with him. She readily accepted his suggestion. Luisa's mother's deception was uncovered when it was revealed that she had known the man for a long time. At that moment, the police came up to her. Luisa's mother admitted that the man was her ex-friend, who had been released from prison in early January 2014. She had visited him multiple times while he was in prison. When Luisa's father found out all the details, he was enraged and couldn't understand how she had let such a dangerous man approach her children. However, his main concern at that moment was finding out where Luisa was. Luisa's mother, who was still protecting the suspected, was brief and told the detectives that she didn't know his full name. Everyone who knew him referred to him as Peluco. When investigators sought more information from her, she became hostile and firmly refused to share any details about her personal life or history. Despite the fact that such information could assist in locating her daughter, it appeared that she was indifferent to the well-being of her 13-year-old girl. Unfortunately for police, neither woman was able to provide enough information to help find the man. Giovanni and his father were greatly affected by this setback, as they had been searching for a long time. To gather information, Luisa's grandfather disguised himself as a homeless man and wandered through the city's dangerous areas. Unfortunately, he did not manage to uncover any useful information. On August 26, 2014, a fisherman visited the police station to report a finding. That morning, he had discovered a body along the banks of the Corca River. When the investigators arrived at the scene, they found a dismembered body with parts scattered around, suggesting that wild animals had disturbed the remains. Initially, many of the body parts were missing, but they did find some legs that were tied together with shoelaces. All of these remains were inside a bag. Additionally, a strand of hair was found within the bag, and this limited evidence was carefully collected for identification. Reports of disappearances in the area were checked against recent appeals. The concerns raised by Giovanni about the missing girls were the most closely related. Clothes found on the body matched those of Luisa. DNA samples were taken from Luisa's father to compare with the remains. After 2 months, in October, the results came in. The human remains found by the riverbank were identified as belonging to Luisa. By this time, additional body parts had also been found. A thorough forensic examination revealed that Luisa died from a severe blow to the right side of her head. Her family was heartbroken upon hearing this news. The elderly grandfather expressed that this was the most tragic event he had ever faced in his long life. The investigation's findings were disheartening. Luisa's body showed no evidence of foreign DNA or biological fluids because of the effects of water, leaving uncertainty about whether she had been abused before her death. No fingerprints or other evidence suitable for examination were found on the bag, and the hair discovered on it belonged to Luisa. There were no signs pointing to a suspect. Additionally, investigators have not yet been able to determine the full name of the man who abused Luisa and is likely connected to her death. Luisa's grandfather took action in response to his granddaughter's death. He put up a black and white flag on the front of his house. He explained that the white color symbolizes his granddaughter's purity, while the black represents mourning. He vowed to keep the flag up until the people responsible for her death are apprehended. He continued his efforts even more. At the top of the house, he installed a cross with purple edges to symbolize his sorrow. The sides of the cross were decorated with green garlands, and the center featured red garlands. The green represented his hope that the police would catch the criminals, while the red symbolized the blood shed by his granddaughter. Detectives resumed interviewing the victims' family acquaintances individually. It was during this process that one of Luisa's friends provided crucial information. The schoolboy reported seeing Luisa on the day she went missing. The boy was aware that Giovanni had returned home from his night shift and was resting. At one point, Luisa expressed a desire to find her uncle, and he offered to assist her. They went out together to search for her uncle and made a stop at a hot dog stand. Luisa noted that it was the same place where she and her brother had been abducted by the abuser in January. After hearing the boy's statement, the police visited a hot dog stand and spoke with a seller. He was hesitant to cooperate, but recalled Luisa's visit from a few months ago. This witness described one of the men who visited the stand with 2 children late one evening in January. Interestingly, he remembered this incident because he had sold a motorcycle to that man and still had his phone number. He then shared this number with Luisa, who called it to arrange a meeting. According to the boy, all this happened about 20-30 minutes later. Therefore, he was happy for Luisa that she had found her uncle, and he went home. After that, Luisa was left alone, next to the tent, waiting for her uncle. After a while, the uncle drove up on a motorcycle. Luisa ran up to him and talked to him about something. After that, she got on the motorcycle, and both of them left in an unknown direction. According to the seller, a few days later, he saw a picture of Luisa in a report about her disappearance, but only now connected all these events. Investigators were amazed that so many people knew who they were talking about, but no one could even provide a name for the suspect. After the story of the classmate and the hot dog seller, there were even more questions. Why was Luisa searching for this man so much? Why did she call him uncle and communicate with him? Why did she leave with a dangerous man? It all sounded absurd. In any case, it was necessary to get the name of this person. The police returned to analyzing the information they had. Since Luisa's mother claimed to have visited this person in prison, it became possible to trace these visits. They decided to check this lead, but it took even longer to check the archives. In December 2014, detectives made an important discovery. Luisa's mother had visited Gabriel Jaime Marulanda Sepulveda, who was 43 years old at the time. Investigating Gabriel's background shed light on why witnesses claimed they didn't recognize him. Since 1995, he had a lengthy criminal history, including various offenses, the most severe being the murder of a student at Universidad Nacional de Bogotá. His record included robberies, assaults, domestic violence, illegal possession of weapons, and escaping from prison, along with several incidents where he was not convicted. Overall, he had been arrested 13 times and faced trial 8 times. He was released for the murder charge at the end of 2013. During this period, he had multiple relationships and 3 children. This information contradicted witness statements, leading to suspicions that they may have been intimidated or that Gabriel had misrepresented himself. When the photo of the suspect was shown to Luisa's brother, he instantly recognized him. The investigators also verified the suspect's connection to Gabriel by checking the phone number obtained from a hot dog seller. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to Luisa's murder. To investigate further, the authorities reviewed his phone records and tracked his geolocation, discovering that his mobile phone was located precisely at the site where Luisa's body was found. On August 21st, around 5:30 p.m., the day after her disappearance, he tried to dispose of the body at that location. Eventually, the police issued a warrant for Gabriel's arrest, but finding him proved to be more challenging than expected. There was very little information available about him. He couldn't be found at his known addresses, but it was known that he had been working as a helper in a coffee shop in the countryside. However, even there, the employers did not offer any useful information. Additionally, the phone number provided by the hot dog seller was no longer in service. Gabriel didn't have to wait long for his next legal trouble. In May 2015, he was arrested while attending a hearing for one of his previous offenses. 2 new charges were added: the abuse and murder of Luisa Fernanda Garces Perez. He could face a prison sentence ranging from 33 to 50 years. Unsurprisingly, Gabriel denied any responsibility for Luisa's death, which led to delays in the trial. The prosecution aimed to collect as much indirect evidence as possible, and a lawyer's involvement further contributed to the postponement. Overall, the hearing was delayed for 2 years, during which the defense tried to paint Gabriel as a victim of police misconduct. There was no concrete evidence linking him to the murder, so the lawyers argued that he was a scapegoat targeted by the police due to a lack of other suspects. Gabriel showed no remorse for his actions. Instead of confessing, he claimed he wasn't in town when Luisa went missing. He also described Luisa's mother as an escort whose services he frequently used, stating this was the reason for his visit to her house in January 2014 while denying any wrongdoing. A crucial witness for the prosecution was a hot dog vendor who had observed Gabriel leaving with Luisa on a motorcycle. Unfortunately, the hot dog vendor did not show up in court. His mother claimed he had found a new job and moved away, but many suspected this was a result of pressure and threats from Gabriel. He was unwilling to testify against Gabriel. The police later learned that he had previously been incarcerated and was a former cellmate of Gabriel, which meant he was aware of Gabriel's violent nature and was afraid for his safety. The hearings started with the prosecutor claiming that Gabriel misled and took Luisa to the riverbank. Gabriel was upset with her when he discovered she was with her father. Giovanni alerted the police. He then hit her on the head, tied her legs with shoelaces, and threw her into the water before escaping. Evidence included witness testimonies and mobile phone records. Ultimately, Gabriel Jaime Marulanda Sepulveda was sentenced to between 25 and 41 years in prison for Luisa's murder and 9 years for the abuse, for a total of 34 to 50 years. Despite the fact that Luisa's family achieved justice, many questions remained unanswered. The criminal never confessed why Louise called him uncle, why she met with him willingly, or why she left with him on a motorcycle. The police believed that Luisa wanted to meet with him to inform him that she had reported him to the authorities and that she probably did not fully realize how dangerous the situation was. After these events, Giovanni still believed that not all perpetrators were held accountable for their crimes. He blamed his ex-wife for the misadventures his daughter had gone through, as well as for her death. However, it seemed that the woman was not overly troubled by all of this. Although many condemned the mother for her carelessness, which cost her daughter dearly, she was never held accountable. On a cold December night in 2011, 13-year-old Erica Lynn Parsons vanished without a trace. Her parents claimed she had gone to live with her biological grandmother, but their story raised suspicions. As investigators began to dig deeper, unsettling details emerged stories of bruises, unexplained absences, and a plastic tote that became impossible to overlook. What truly happened to Erica, and why did it take years for the truth to be revealed? This is a tragic story of a girl who was silenced, but whose story would not remain hidden. Erica Lynn Parsons was born on February 24, 1998, Carolyn Parsons' child. Carolyn separated from her husband, Steve, who was not the biological father, before Erica was born. Despite her small size, Erica was a lively baby. However, just days after her birth, Carolyn had to make a difficult decision due to financial struggles. She chose to put Erica up for adoption to give her daughter a better future. Although Erica's biological father was not in the picture, Carolyn's former brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Sandy and Casey Parsons, chose to adopt Erica. Erica became part of the Parsons family when she joined them at just 4 weeks old. Although the adoption was officially completed in 2000, Sandy later suggested that it actually took place in July instead of March. Casey Parsons happily remembered those early days, saying they had her from the time she was 4 weeks old. By the time the adoption was finalized, she was already calling them Mama and Daddy. They were the only parents she had known. Sandy and Casey had a tumultuous relationship. They got married in the early 1990s and had 3 children. However, their marriage was marred by incidents of domestic violence. Sandy was convicted of assaulting Casey in 1994 and 1997, leading to court-ordered probation and community service. Despite these challenges, they stayed together and welcomed another child, Erica, into their family. Concerns about Erica's safety arose in 2002 when social services started investigating allegations of abuse in the Parsons home, dating back to when Erica was only 2 years old. These allegations raised significant worries about how the family treated their adopted daughter. The Department of Social Services initiated an investigation into claims that Erica had been physically abused. Reports indicated that Casey Parsons often used a belt to discipline Erica, which resulted in visible bruises. Observers noted marks on Erica's buttocks, the back of her legs, and the side of her face. It was also reported that Erica sometimes refused to eat, and that Casey had told her she was not loved. During the interview with the Department of Social Services, Casey denied the claims of abuse. The investigator noticed that Erica seemed comfortable around her parents, sitting on their laps without any signs of fear. However, it was noted that Erica was quite small for her age, weighing only 41 pounds at 4 years old. To ensure Erica's safety, a safety plan was put in place. Casey and Sandy Parsons agreed to use non-physical methods of discipline, including timeouts and grounding, committed to providing a safe and stable home for Erica. On March 1, 2003, Casey went to Mexico for a medical procedure to reverse her tubal ligation. Later that year, in August, Erica started attending Boston Elementary School. The staff remembered her as a shy but kind girl who smiled frequently and had a fondness for stickers. One teacher noted that Erica would push her bangs out of her face when she felt nervous and would shine with pride when she received compliments. In January 2004, Casey announced online that she was pregnant, expecting a child in September. Around this time, the Department of Social Services received a complaint about the Parsons family, which prompted officials to visit their home. The complaint alleged that Erica was weak and that Casey no longer wanted her, asserting that the parents had attempted to give her away. Casey and Sandy denied using physical punishment, stating they raised their voices instead of hitting their children. They also explained that Erica suffered from gastrointestinal issues, causing her to vomit food she didn't like, and denied any threats to withhold food or give her away. When the Department of Social Services interviewed Erica in private, she described discipline as timeouts or loss of privileges, and mentioned that she might get spanked for very serious misbehavior. Although Erica seemed happy and well-connected with her adoptive parents, investigators noted her small size and frailty. The Department of Social Services required the Parsons to seek medical care for Erica if her eating issues continued or if her development fell behind. Nonetheless, evidence of neglect was found, as Erica was not receiving necessary medical treatment. She was then placed with her aunt, who noticed that Erica was wearing toddler-sized clothes and was severely underweight. While living with her aunt, Erica began eating regularly, playing, and gaining weight. She also revealed that Casey and Sandy had physically disciplined her. However, the aunt did not pursue legal custody. After 8 months, Casey and Sandy regained custody of Erica. In 2004, Erica moved to a different elementary school. On August 20th of that year, Casey gave birth to a daughter. By 2005, Casey was pregnant again, but unfortunately experienced an early miscarriage. She then started a business. Some reports described this business as a Chihuahua puppy mill, although specific details were limited. Later that year, Erica was homeschooled through a program created by Casey at their home. Casey was the chief administrator, and the state did not require background checks or detailed progress reports for the school. Records indicate that the program enrolled 3 girls and 1 boy, but there were no annual achievement test scores submitted from 2005 onwards. After this, information about Erica became difficult to find. On July 30th, 2013, Erica's 19-year-old brother, Jamie Parsons, argued with their parents and reported Erica missing. Jamie testified that the last time he saw Erica was on November 19th, 2011. She was standing in a corner, which was a common punishment Erica endured. She didn't look well. She looked like a zombie, he said. She said she didn't feel well. She said she couldn't breathe. Casey Parsons heard this and told her to shut up. When he woke up the next morning, his parents had left early, which was unusual, and Erica was gone. His parents returned home without Erica, and he sensed something was wrong. Jamie felt this explanation was strange, especially since his father, Sandy, appeared very upset when talking about Erica's absence. He recalled his father looking extremely pale and anxious. When he asked his parents where she was, they claimed they had taken her to Asheville, North Carolina, to stay with her biological grandmother, who supposedly reached out on Facebook to reconnect with her. Jamie told the authorities that this was the last he had heard about Erica. An investigation into Erica's disappearance began immediately. Detectives conducted a thorough search of the Parsons home, lifting floorboards, examining the yard for possible hidden graves, and following every lead available. Despite their hard work, Erica's location remained unknown. They received countless tips and reports, including supposed sightings of her on the roadside and calls from psychics, but none provided any solid answers. The FBI got involved, offering rewards and drawing national attention to the case. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created an age progression photo to show what Erica might look like at 15 based on her appearance at age 9. These images were widely distributed on billboards in hopes of generating new information. Authorities were committed to finding Erica. Casey and Sandy told investigators that the last time they saw Erica was in December 2011 at a McDonald's in Mooresville, North Carolina. They claimed they took Erica to meet her biological grandmother, Irene Nan Goodman. Additionally, Casey and Sandy were unable to provide any contact information for Erica's grandmother, including the Facebook profile they said she used to communicate with them. The lead investigator put in a lot of effort to find Erica's grandmother and searched for people with her name in Asheville, but he found no evidence of anyone related to Erica. By August 2013, detectives publicly stated their belief that the story about Erica's grandmother was false. They also noted that Sandy and Casey were not cooperating with the investigation. Around the same time, Erica's biological mother, Carolyn Parsons, traveled to North Carolina to help the investigators. On August 21st, Casey and Sandy appeared on the Dr. Phil show, where they argued that Erica was not actually missing, but was a rebellious teenager who simply chose not to communicate with them. During the show, Casey mentioned that Erica's grandmother had told her that Erica refused to come home after staying with her for 2 months. Casey told Dr. Phil that Erica did not bring any of her personal belongings because when she went to stay with the Goodmans, they bought all new clothes for her to wear. When the Goodmans picked her up, a woman nicknamed Strawberry was also there and showed them a pile of clothes with tags in the back of their truck. The house where she was allegedly staying had a horse stable. The Parsons claimed that they also brought their other daughter, Brooke, along to bring Erica to Asheville. Brooke disputed this claim in her own interviews with the police, saying that she never rode a horse to Asheville to bring Erica to live there. Casey also claimed she attempted to contact Erica's grandmother, but the phone number was no longer in service, which she interpreted as Erica blocking their number. Although they appeared on national television, Casey and Sandy claimed they were good parents and insisted that Erica was safe. However, investigators were skeptical due to noticeable inconsistencies in their story. In September 2013, Casey opened her home to the media, showing Erica's old bedroom. But by then, public and official concern about Casey and Sandy's account was growing. The search for Erica continued as worries mounted about her well-being since her last confirmed sighting in 2011. Detectives on Erica Parsons' case had long suspected that Casey and Sandy were withholding important information. They believed that separating the couple might reveal the truth, as Casey seemed to dominate Sandy. However, it proved difficult to keep them apart until investigators discovered a significant error. The Parsons were still collecting adoption assistance and food stamps for Erica, even though she had not lived with them for 2 years. They received monthly checks of $634 in adoption assistance and continued to cash those checks after Erica was no longer living with them. They also continued to claim Erica on their tax returns. These federal benefits, meant for Erica's care, became crucial in involving the FBI. Casey pleaded guilty to 15 charges, while Sandy opted for trial. A jury found Sandy guilty on most charges in October 2014. The jury did not accept Sandy's claim that Casey had been in charge of the fraudulent activities and that he was unaware of their financial situation. At a sentencing hearing in federal court on February 18, 2015, Jamie Parsons and Robin Ashley testified about Erica's abuse by the Parsons family. Federal prosecutor Anand Ramaswamy stated that there was no record of Erica during the time her adoptive parents were receiving illegal money. Declare. The reason is that she is no longer alive. The hearing was continued until March 27th. Prosecutors also presented evidence of a series of scams allegedly perpetuated by Casey Parsons. In 2000, Casey was hired to be a surrogate mother. She became pregnant and took a payment of $10,000 for her services. Weeks later, she called the biological mother, Amy Miller, to say that she had miscarried. Miller says she believed Casey was still pregnant, as Casey refused to turn over medical records, changed her phone number, and sent her nasty emails. Casey then offered to sell the baby to her own sister, Robin, who in turn searched for Miller online to tell her Casey was indeed still pregnant and that Casey had taken money from 2 other couples who wanted to adopt the baby. Miller was able to take custody of her child at birth after getting law enforcement involved. Evidence was also presented of an eBay scam, where Casey accepted money for items listed on eBay, but never sent the items. Judge Schroeder called Casey a serial swindler. On March 27, 2015, U.S. District Court Judge Thomas Schroeder sentenced Casey Parsons to 10 years in prison and Sandy to 8 years for fraud. Schroeder believes that Casey was the mastermind behind the events in question and stated that Erica suffered terrible abuse, noting that the fraud distracted investigators from other matters. The judge also mentioned that there was no evidence indicating that Erica was alive. In 2016, there was a significant breakthrough when Sandy, after more than 3 years of deception, confessed that Erica had died 5 years earlier at the age of 13. On September 29th, Sandy led investigators to Erica's remains. They were buried in a small grave near Sandy's mother's home on Blair Hendrick Road, between the towns of Pageland and Mount Croghan, South Carolina. Prior to the discovery, detectives recovered items during a search of a shed on Sandy's property, including a videotape, a hammer, teeth, and school records. There, Sandy quickly indicated the location of a shallow grave where he and Casey had buried Erica. Detectives noted that Sandy was somber and tearful during his confession. Sandy described the events leading up to Erica's death in December 2011. He was awakened by Casey, who informed him that Erica had died. Casey had placed Erica's body in a plastic tote, where it remained for 2 days while they figured out what to do. During this time, they continued with their lives and even attended a Christmas party. Eventually, they took Erica's remains to a site in Chesterfield County to bury her. To try to cover up any evidence, they poured bleach over her body. To avoid being tracked, they removed the batteries from their phones during their trips to the burial site, once to dig the grave and a second time to dispose of Erica's remains. After nearly 5 years of being hidden, Erica's body was finally found. Investigator Chad Moose led the effort to recover her remains, ensuring that she was treated with respect after her tragic life. To honor her, her remains were placed in a body bag that was left unzipped, allowing her to be at peace and no longer in darkness. Moose also added a stuffed animal to the bag while transporting her back to Rowan County. Finding Erica provided closure to a case that had troubled the community, and she was finally buried with the love and dignity she deserved. As one investigator noted, Erica received more love from the community than from her adoptive family. Investigators believed from the beginning that Casey Parsons was primarily responsible for what happened to Erica. They did not reveal the finding of Erica's remains in 2016, hoping that Casey would eventually confess. When faced with questions, Casey firmly denied any participation. She repeatedly claimed, "I've never been there," rejecting all allegations of abuse or misconduct. However, the evidence in the form of Erica's remains revealed a chilling account of ongoing and severe abuse. On October 14, 2016, Erica's remains were sent to the medical examiner, who took 3 months to carefully examine her skeleton. The results were heartbreaking. Erica had suffered severe and ongoing abuse, with injuries all over her body affecting her face, torso, back, and limbs. She had multiple fractures, including broken bones in her shoulder blades and ribs that had partially healed before being broken again. Some of the injuries showed signs of long-term trauma, with new bone growth trying to heal the damage. It was evident that Erica had faced continuous physical violence. Her brother, Jamie Parsons, confirmed the extent of the abuse in interviews. He described how Erica was regularly beaten, often with belts or remote controls, and mentioned friendly reminders, a cruel term used by Casey for bending Erica's fingers back until they almost touched her wrist. Erica experienced more than just physical violence. She was also starved for long periods, severely affecting her growth. By the time she was 13, her bones resembled those of a typical 9-year-old. This combination of abuse and neglect was considered torture, marking an extreme level of cruelty rarely seen in cases of child abuse. Family photos highlighted Erica's suffering as well. While her siblings looked happy and carefree in their pictures, Erica was often shown standing alone, facing a corner. These images powerfully illustrated her isolation and the neglect she faced, making the contrast between her siblings' joy and her own mistreatment deeply tragic. On June 18, 2017, Erica was finally laid to rest in a funeral organized and funded by the Rowan County community. Hundreds of people attended, wanting to show Erica the love and respect she never received during her life. On February 19, 2018, a grand jury indicted both Sandy and Casey Parsons on counts of first-degree murder, felony child abuse inflicting serious injury, felony concealment of death, and felony obstruction of justice. Casey Parsons was brought to Rowan County for a court appearance on March 14, 2018, while Sandy Parsons was brought back for a court hearing on March 15. Prosecutors announced in April 2018 that they were seeking the death penalty for both Casey and Sandy Parsons. As of February 2019, defense attorneys agreed to separate trials. Casey Parsons pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on August 2, 2019 in Rowan County Superior Court and was sentenced to life without parole. The trial date for Sandy Parsons was set for April 6, 2020, and his attorney requested a change of venue. Sandy Parsons pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, child abuse, concealment of death, and obstruction on December 17, 2019, and was sentenced to at least 33 years to be served after his federal sentence. On January 14, 2022, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons website, Sandy Parsons was released from federal custody after completing his sentence for tax and mail fraud in connection with benefits received on behalf of Erica. That same day, he began serving a state sentence in Central Prison. Federal Bureau of Prisons records show Casey Parsons was released from federal custody November 25, 2023, to begin serving her state sentence. At that time, her husband was listed as a prisoner at Alexander Correctional Institution. The motivations of the Parsons are still not fully understood, but their actions indicate a profound level of cruelty and neglect. Erica was treated inhumanely, enduring unimaginable suffering from those who were supposed to care for her. As her community honors her memory and strives for justice, there is hope that policies and systems will be improved to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Erica, now at peace, will always be remembered. The relationship between parents and their adult children is affected by various factors that start to develop during childhood. One of the most important factors is parenting style, which can foster trust, cooperation, and support, or, conversely, cause control and strict discipline. The McCullough family initially appeared to be a typical middle-class family, educated, financially secure. The strict parents raised 5 children, teaching them what they believed were proper morals and life goals. However, the children had a different view. As they grew older, they moved away and kept in touch with their aging parents only occasionally through text messages. They did not know that both of their parents had unexpectedly passed away 4 years ago. The truth emerged only when the family's doctor expressed concerns. The McCullough family resided in a large 3-story house in a peaceful upper-middle-class neighborhood in Great Baddow, Essex, England. The family was led by John McCullough, a respected professor at a prestigious university known for his research on autism spectrum disorders. His wife, Lois, dedicated herself to maintaining a well-organized home and raising their children. In October 1988, they welcomed their youngest child, a daughter named Virginia. At that time, both parents were in their 40s. Although Virginia's arrival was unexpected, the McCullough viewed it as a blessing due to their strong religious beliefs. The McCullough children were raised in a strict environment filled with discipline. Their household followed a rigid schedule, with each child responsible for specific tasks. Disobedience often resulted in physical punishment. For instance, Lois once used a belt on her child so harshly that the girl ended up with visible bruises, which led child welfare services to investigate the McCullough home. Even after many years together, Lois and John reportedly did not show much affection for each other. They slept in separate bedrooms, communicated in a reserved manner, and did not display any tenderness, such as hugs or kisses. This lack of affection extended to their children. The McCulloughs seldom expressed warmth or praise, as they believed it would spoil their kids. Instead, they commonly punished minor infractions. The children were expected to excel academically and help with household chores, but they were not allowed to visit friends or have guests over. Discipline was strictly enforced, and breaking the rules was not tolerated. Lois faced obsessive-compulsive disorder from a young age, along with misophobia, the fear of germs and dirt. This resulted in her compulsive cleaning and frequent disinfection of her home. Pets were not allowed, and her children were required to keep their rooms to her strict standards. Lois would often conduct surprise checks. Any hint of dust or disorder would lead to harsh punishments. As time went on, her mental health worsened. She became even more withdrawn, avoiding interaction with neighbors completely. She only left the house when necessary and rushed back as soon as she could. In her later years, she stopped making eye contact and kept her head down to minimize interactions. In addition to her existing fears, she developed agoraphobia, which left her nearly unable to leave her home. John, Lois's husband, had diabetes, which caused his eyesight to deteriorate quickly. By his 70s, he had retired from teaching and was living on a small pension. Similar to Lois, John rarely went out. When he did run errands, he often didn't greet others, not because he was rude, but because he struggled to recognize faces due to his poor vision unless someone spoke to him directly. Once the older children became adults, they moved out of the McCullough household and spread across the country. They created their own lives and families, keeping in touch with their parents mainly through occasional phone calls or, more commonly, text messages. This pattern illustrated the emotional distance within the McCullough family, as they did not have a tradition of celebrating holidays together or marking special occasions at home. For the grown children, it was sufficient to know that their parents were well taken care of by their youngest sibling, who continued to live in the family home. Virginia, the youngest of the McCullough children, stood apart from her older sisters. Unlike them, she didn't rush to leave home after high school. From a young age, Virginia was seen as odd and introverted. While her siblings had limited social lives due to their parents' strict rules, such as prohibiting guests and outings, Virginia took her isolation further. She found it difficult to connect even with her brothers and sisters. Instead of engaging with others, she often talked to herself and created complex stories which were mistaken for real events, leading others to label her a compulsive liar. However, she didn't seem bothered by her lack of social connections. Her parents believed that Virginia was destined by a higher power to care for them in their old age. Her absence of a personal life, lack of dating, and tendency to avoid people were seen as completely normal by Lois and John. They accepted her role as their caregiver as her true calling. It is uncertain whether Virginia pursued any formal education after high school, but it seems likely as her parents valued education highly. However, she struggled to maintain a stable career due to her unusual behavior and tendency to be dishonest. At one point, Virginia worked as a bartender at a local pub and also had a job at the post office. But mostly she spent her time at home, assisting her parents with household tasks. Whenever her parents asked why she wasn't working, Virginia had convincing explanations. She claimed to have been unfairly dismissed, was actively job hunting, or was waiting for a response from a large company that had reviewed her application. As her parents aged, they became increasingly less worried about her situation. By the time John was in his 70s, his vision had significantly declined. He had almost no sight in one eye and blurred vision in the other. Lois's anxiety had also intensified over the years, and she only ventured out for medical appointments with their family therapist, who managed their health and adjusted their treatments. Lois and John seldom interacted with neighbors and appeared to be content with their lifestyle, especially knowing Virginia would always be there to look after them. Virginia spent a significant amount of time on the computer, mostly playing games. She told her parents she was actively seeking work and sending out her resume to various companies. However, as time went on, she was unable to secure a job. To continue living off her parents without earning their disapproval, she devised a plan to elicit their pity instead. Knowing her parents were very concerned about health, they regularly went for medical checkups and took their medications on time. Virginia began to complain about her own health, fabricating serious conditions she didn't have. To make her claims more convincing, she visited doctors and described symptoms she found online. She underwent various tests and blood work, but none of her conditions were ever confirmed. She told her parents she was diagnosed with diabetes, which she claimed to have inherited from her father, along with heart problems. She also mentioned having a tumor that required urgent surgery. Concerned for her well-being, John and Lois provided her with money for treatment. In 2017, Virginia unexpectedly announced her pregnancy but never disclosed who the father was. John and Lois were taken aback by the news but were willing to embrace an illegitimate grandchild. They reasoned that their daughter, who was nearly 30 and single, could use someone to care for after they were gone. However, Virginia's deception escalated. She even purchased a fake pregnancy belly online to maintain the charade, but after a few months, she claimed to feel unwell and went to the hospital. Upon her return, she told her parents that she had lost the baby. John and Lois grieved this loss, unaware that their daughter had merely tricked them. Virginia asked her parents if she could take full control of their finances and accounts. Since her parents didn't understand modern technology and rarely left their home, they agreed. This decision gave Virginia complete access to the family accounts and bank cards, allowing her to use them however she wanted. At that time, Virginia had developed a habit of impulsive shopping. Now she had the means to support it. Every day, she ordered various unnecessary items from online stores, with most of them never even being opened. She would stash the packages away in a closet, under her bed, or in the storage room. However, there was one purchase, a kitchen appliance, that she gave to her mother, and it was well received. Her mother appreciated the gift genuinely, even praised Virginia, which was a rare occurrence. In early 2018, Virginia suddenly believed she was an artist, turned her room into an art studio, filled with paints, an easel, and supplies. She told her parents that art experts had praised her work, that her paintings would be shown in a contemporary art gallery soon. She even claimed she would become famous and make a lot of money. However, from the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s, Virginia started visiting online casino sites regularly, where she placed bets and lost money. Over time, her gambling problem worsened. After accessing her parents' savings, she began increasing her bets until she lost all their money. John and Lois were unaware that they were nearly bankrupt. They couldn't check their account balance because they didn't have access to online banking. At that time, Virginia had begun taking out loans using their names, indulging in frivolous purchases and gambling away their savings. This situation couldn't continue indefinitely. No one was making payments on the loans, and as Virginia kept borrowing more money, their debt continued to increase along with the accumulating interest. One day, the bank called their home phone, and John answered. They informed him about the large debts and unpaid loans. John felt faint, nearly had a heart attack upon hearing this news. He immediately told his wife. Together, they went to confront their daughter, Virginia, demanding an explanation. Virginia, pretending to be surprised, promised them that she would investigate the issue. She then sat at her computer, typed for a few minutes, claimed that hackers had accessed her account, stolen their money, and taken out loans in their name. Virginia assured her parents that she would resolve the problem and that they would recover their stolen money within the next few months. She pretended to be active and told her parents she had reported the criminals to the police, assuring them that they would be caught and everything would be returned. Virginia claimed that the issue had been solved, stating that the money was back in their account and that there were no loans to worry about for a while. John and Lois felt relieved, but 6 months later, they were contacted again about their accumulating debts. This time, Virginia convinced them that there had been a mistake in the bank's system and incorrect information had been shared. She was very convincing. Her elderly parents trusted her once more. Virginia realized that her situation was not sustainable. She had been borrowing money and understood that the bank would eventually demand repayment. Her parents would continue to receive calls, raising more questions about her financial situation. Sooner or later, they would see through her lies. If she continued to deceive them, they might even take the drastic step of contacting the authorities to find out what was really happening with their finances. Virginia carefully considered how she could continue living in her parents' house, using their money and taking loans in their names without facing any consequences. Surprisingly, her older siblings were completely oblivious to the situation. They rarely called their parents and visited them even less. In the meantime, John and Lois never expressed any concerns or complaints to their children. By March 2019, the situation had reached a critical point. Virginia realized she needed to take decisive action. Tragically, Her plan was disturbing. She decided to kill her elderly parents. She knew she had to do this covertly, ensuring that no one would suspect anything, and that everyone would continue to believe John and Lois were living happily in their spacious home. Fortunately, since they had always been reclusive, it was unlikely that the neighbors would notice anything amiss. Due to chronic health issues, Lois and John often needed various medications, and Virginia was in charge of managing their prescriptions. However, Virginia began to change the dosages of her mother's sedatives, blood pressure medications, and psychiatric drugs over several months without their knowledge. In doing so, she secretly harmed her parents while closely monitoring how they responded to the altered medications. Lois and John, believing their health issues were just typical seasonal problems and trusting their daughter, did not seek medical help for their worsening condition. They thought their symptoms would resolve on their own since they had experienced similar issues in the past. In early June 2019, Virginia collected enough strong prescription medications to potentially kill both her parents. She purchased a sharp kitchen knife along with tools for crushing pills. On June 17, 2019, Virginia made the decision that this would be the final day for her father and mother. She acted normally, making sure not to raise any suspicions. She prepared dinner, went shopping, and assisted her mother with various household tasks. In the evening, she sat with her parents while they watched television and later made them a lethal cocktail that would ensure they wouldn't wake up the next day. Her father sometimes enjoyed a small amount of strong alcohol from his collection of expensive bottles, which he had spent years accumulating. Now in retirement, he took pleasure in tasting different drinks from his collection. Virginia mixed a deadly dose of heart medication into a bottle of aged whiskey. The alcohol concealed the bitter taste of the pills. However, her mother, Lois, did not drink alcohol. For her mother, Virginia prepared herbal tea and claimed the unusual bitterness came from medicinal herbs that were harmless. Lois, however, chose not to finish the tea. After drinking, John went to his room and Virginia assisted him, wishing him good night. She left her mother's tea on the bedside table, hoping Lois would drink it before heading to her own room. Virginia glanced at her mother through the partially open door before going to bed. That night, she slept peacefully, without any feelings of guilt or doubt. The next morning, she took her time and stayed under the covers until almost 11, a rare luxury in their household. She figured that if no one had come by to check on her and tell her to get up by that time, no one would. First, she entered her father's room and found him in bed, appearing to be peacefully asleep. When Virginia touched his hand, she realized it was cold and stiff, indicating that he had died shortly after going to sleep. His heart couldn't cope with the mixture of medications and alcohol, leading to his passing. Next, Virginia entered her mother's bedroom and discovered that Lois hadn't finished her drink. Although she was alive, Lois was unable to get out of bed because of the heavy sedatives she had taken. She felt disoriented and confused, struggling to understand her surroundings. Lois asked Virginia what time it was. Virginia replied that it was still early, suggesting that her mother could go back to sleep after she turned on her favorite radio station. Virginia left the room and went to the utility closet, where she took out a sharp knife and a hammer that she had bought earlier. It was clear she didn't have a solid plan, but she believed these tools would help her finish what she had started. When Virginia returned to her mother's room, Lois was smiling and listening to her favorite song, completely unaware of her daughter's presence. Virginia hesitated for a moment, then raised the hammer, brought it down forcefully onto Lois's head. Blood began to flow from the injury, but Lois calmly looked at her daughter and asked what she was doing. Without answering, Virginia grabbed the knife, started to stab her mother in the neck and chest in a frantic manner. Within a few minutes, the brutal attack was over. Virginia dropped the bloody knife on the floor, knelt down, and held her mother's still warm hand. She sat silently for about half an hour before going to the shower to wash off the blood and change into clean clothes. The next day, Virginia remained at home with her parents' bodies, trying to decide how to handle the situation. She thought about different ways to dispose of them, but soon realized it would be nearly impossible to discreetly remove and bury the bodies. The neighbors might notice something unusual. She lacked the physical strength to move both bodies and dig graves. Ultimately, Virginia came up with a bleak solution. She decided to seal her parents inside the house. However, executing this plan would take a lot of effort. She started by visiting a sporting goods store where she purchased 2 sleeping bags to serve as makeshift coffins. Next, she went to a hardware store and bought many rolls of plastic sheeting, cement mix, expanding foam, and cinder blocks, which were delivered to her home. When the neighbors inquired, Virginia said her father was working on a minor renovation project, and they did not ask any more questions. Overwhelmed by the task, Virginia carefully placed her parents in sleeping bags, tightly wrapped them in plastic sheeting and tape to create a seal. She then moved her father's body to his office, positioning it in a corner behind his desk. Following the instructions, she mixed the cement and started to construct a makeshift sarcophagus around him, pouring cement over the body using expanding foam to fill in any gaps. Virginia chose to leave her mother's body in the room where the violent incident happened. She pushed the sleeping bag, along with the blood-stained blanket and other bedding, into the closet. Next, she coated everything with expanding foam. Then, she wrapped the closet in 20 rolls of plastic sheeting to seal it off. Finally, she built a wall using the leftover cinder blocks, closing off the corner where the closet with her mother's remains was located. On the same day, Virginia ordered 2 new credit cards from the bank in the names of her deceased parents. To relieve stress, she started making online purchases. She also sent several messages to her siblings, pretending to be her mother. In these messages, she claimed that she and her father were taking a trip to the seaside to relax and improve their health. Her older sisters, who seldom visited, did not question her and simply wished their parents a pleasant getaway. The global issues provided Virginia with an excuse for the next 6 months. She continued her daily activities as if nothing had changed. She did grocery shopping, spoke with her neighbors, collected her parents' pensions, and occasionally sent messages to relatives pretending to be her mother, hoping to keep them from worrying. She even scheduled appointments for her parents with their doctor, but cancelled them for various reasons. When people inquired about her parents and why they hadn't been around, she said they were staying with one of their many children. In the spring of 2020, the global issues leading to a worldwide lockdown. This situation worked in Virginia's favor because she no longer needed to explain why her parents weren't seen outside. With the lockdown, no visitors were coming to see them anytime soon. During this time, Virginia would sometimes call the family doctor, pretending to be her mother to seek advice. However, when the doctor recommended an in-person appointment or offered to visit, she would make up excuses to avoid it. Virginia sent messages to her sisters using Lois's phone, inquiring about their lives and the grandchildren, but she never invited them to visit. If any of them mentioned planning a trip, she would discourage them from coming. She even called the police while pretending to be her mother, complaining about noisy neighbors or disturbances. Over time, Virginia's behavior became more unusual. She began to impose herself on people she barely knew, offering friendship and creating bizarre stories about her life. Claiming she was about to get married and move away, she also harassed delivery drivers with numerous questions and frequently called the police for minor issues. In the small town, people saw her as the local eccentric odd but harmless. For over 4 years, Virginia successfully hid the fact that her parents had died. Even her siblings never realized they were gone, believing the messages and greeting cards they received were truly from their parents when, in fact, it was Virginia sending them. The only person who suspected something was amiss was the family doctor. He grew worried when the McCullough, who had always taken their health seriously, stopped showing up for routine checkups and lab tests. Virginia picked up their prescriptions and assured the doctor that her parents were fine. Although he repeatedly scheduled appointments, Virginia cancelled each time with various excuses. Several times, the doctor came to the McCullough's house to check on their health, but instead met Virginia, who said her parents were visiting relatives. In September 2023, the doctor called the police to express his concerns and requested an investigation. On September 13, 2023, the police visited the McCullough home and asked Virginia to bring her parents to the door. Virginia became visibly nervous, claimed that her parents had gone on vacation without their phones to avoid any disturbances. She assured them that her mom and dad would be back in a couple of weeks. However, the police became suspicious of their absence. On 15 September, Essex police executed a search warrant at McCullough's home, entered the house, and arrested Virginia McCullough. Virginia calmly stated that she had something to show them. She then led the officers to her father's office, pointing out a makeshift grave by the wall. Next, she took them to her mother's room and indicated a sealed closet. The bodies of the McCulloughs were found that same day. Due to advanced decomposition, it was challenging to determine the exact cause of death. However, Virginia, now facing charges, fully confessed and provided a detailed account of how she killed her parents. When asked for her motive, she cited old childhood grudges, claimed her parents were cruel, and described them as true monsters. When the tragic events at the McCullough household were revealed, the residents of the small town of Great Baddow were shocked. However, no one was more horrified than the older children of them, who had always believed their parents were alive and being cared for by their younger sister. The family's strained relationships allowed Virginia to hide her crime for many years. Investigators determined that her motives were not based on childhood trauma or mistreatment, as she had claimed, but rather driven by financial gain. For years, Virginia had been using her parents' pension while accumulating significant debts in their names. McCullough is facing double murder charges and appeared in court on September 18th, where she was taken into custody. The next day, she appeared via video link at Basildon Crown Court from Peterborough Prison, where Judge Samantha Lee scheduled a plea hearing for December 1st. An inquest into the deaths was opened by Essex coroner Michelle Brown on October 10th and was paused while the police investigation continues. During the hearing, it was revealed that Lois McCullough died from a stab wound to the chest. The cause of death for John McCullough is still under investigation. On December 1st, McCullough appeared at Chelmsford Crown Court via video link from prison, but did not enter a plea. Her defense requested more time to prepare reports from expert witnesses. Judge Christopher Morgan scheduled the next hearing for February 5, 2024, and set a deadline of February 1st for the defense to submit their report. At the hearing on July 4th, Virginia McCullough pleaded guilty to both counts of murder, and a sentencing hearing was set to begin on October 10th. The sentencing hearing occurred on October 11th, with Judge Johnson presiding. Virginia was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after a minimum of 36 years, which means she can be considered for release starting on October 3, 2059. McCullough's sentence was then sent to the Attorney General's office as part of the Sentencing Over Sentence program. However, in January 2025, the Attorney General's office reviewed the sentence and determined it did not meet the criteria for an appeal to the Court of Appeals. What keeps a marriage together when love, trust, and respect are absent? Some people attempt to maintain the family for the sake of their children, while others worry about what others might think. Additionally, some may feel restrained by their religious beliefs, or a combination of these factors. However, the intense desire to save a marriage at any cost can sometimes lead to devastating outcomes. The story of Jacqueline and Paul Crimble is not one of a kind, but it gained a lot of attention because of its brutal nature, greed, and lack of morals. The perpetrator was called the Black Widow and was imprisoned. However, in a revealing interview, her daughter admitted that Jacqueline showed her cruelty even while in prison. Jacqueline, known as Jackie, was born in 1974 in County Armagh, Northern Ireland. She was the youngest of two children in a typical middle-class family. Since childhood, Jacqueline displayed erratic, spoiled, defiant, and occasionally aggressive behavior. As a teenager, her actions became increasingly unmanageable, but her family attributed this to typical adolescent issues, believing she would eventually outgrow it. In high school, Jacqueline met Paul Crimble, who was 3 years older than her and very different in personality. Despite their differences, they were drawn to each other, a classic example of opposites attracting. Paul was humble and shy. Coming from a religious background, he was a good student, recognized for his talents. Jacqueline's boldness, confidence captivated him. She was the first girl he had serious feelings for, and likely the only one. Jacqueline's parents were supportive of her relationship with Paul, believing he would help her become more calm and sensible. It often felt like they treated Paul better than Jacqueline, welcoming him into the family from the very first meeting. In contrast, Paul's parents were cautious about his choice, but they allowed the relationship to continue. Friends from school noticed that Jacqueline and Paul seemed mismatched. Jacqueline frequently instigated conflicts and preferred to settle matters with physical confrontations, while Paul always sought peaceful solutions. He was known for being friendly, open-minded, and responsible, consistently keeping his promises and ready to lend a helping hand. Paul was described as a kind, sensible, and mature young man, displaying wisdom beyond his years. At 17, Jacqueline became pregnant by her boyfriend, Paul, who was 20 and already in college. She told him right away. Upon hearing the news, Paul immediately stated that he was ready to marry her, take full responsibility for her and the baby. Jacqueline felt unprepared for family life and raising a child. However, terminating the pregnancy was not an option for her, as neither she nor Paul, belonging to a religious family, could consider it. Paul decided to buy an engagement ring and proposed to Jacqueline, who accepted. They had a simple wedding in 1992, celebrating with their closest family and friends. A few days before the event, Paul shared with his best friend that he and Jacqueline were fundamentally different in many ways. He had doubts about how genuine her feelings were and even felt afraid of her temper. Paul also questioned whether his feelings for her were true love or simply sympathy and obligation. Since he had never been in a relationship with anyone else, he had no basis for comparison. His friend listened carefully and cautioned Paul against going through with the marriage, suggesting it could be the biggest mistake of his life and might lead to lifelong unhappiness. Despite this advice, Paul was resolute. He felt he couldn't abandon Jacqueline, who was expecting their child. He believed that becoming a mother would positively change Jacqueline, making her more gentle and calm. Paul hoped for a positive future, but he was unaware of how mistaken he was. Family life without love began to reveal itself. In early 1993, they had their first child, a daughter named Danielle. 6 years later, Jacqueline gave birth to their son. Paul worked hard to support his family and ensured they had everything they needed. After their second child was born, the Crimbles decided to move to a larger home and bought a cozy 3-bedroom townhouse in Armagh, relocating in 2000. By that time, Paul had a senior position in mechanical engineering and was earning a good salary. Meanwhile, his wife chose not to work, saying she preferred to take care of the household and the children. Unfortunately, she wasn't very good at these tasks. Jacqueline was often selfish, lazy, quick-tempered, and displayed aggression, even toward their children. As the children got older, Jacqueline attempted to find a job, but her argumentative and confrontational nature led to her being frequently unemployed. Instead of working, she spent most evenings at bars, drinking alcohol, while her husband stayed home to care for their daughter and son. When sober, Jacqueline was not very pleasant, but when she drank, she became aggressive, instigating conflicts, getting into fights, using offensive language, and behaving inappropriately with various men. Any attempts to ask her to behave more appropriately were met with hostility, making her unpredictable. Neighbors and family friends were aware of the situation, felt sympathy for Paul and the children, who were most affected by Jacqueline's behavior. Living in a small, quiet town, many people knew about her troubles and tried to steer clear of her. Her negative reputation impacted her husband and children, causing them to face issues with their peers at school. Jacqueline instilled fear in her family, as she could become aggressive at any time. Paul tried to tolerate the situation, but it was evident to his friends, family, and co-workers that he was uncomfortable around Jacqueline, or even when she was mentioned. Many advised him to leave her, but Paul was worried about losing custody of their children. During disagreements, Jacqueline would quickly threaten to prevent him from seeing their daughter and son. She also warned him that she could enlist her male acquaintances from bars to harm him. Consequently, Paul often surrendered to her demands and remained quiet. On the morning of June 20th, 2004, Jacqueline called emergency services, urgently asking for help. She reported that 3 strangers had invaded her home, attacking both her and her husband. They had tied them up and attempted to rob them before escaping in their car, taking her husband with them. When police officers and medics arrived at their home, they found Jacqueline with her hands bound behind her back using a plastic cable tie, but her legs were free, suggesting she had managed to partially escape. Interestingly, she showed no visible injuries or bruises, despite claiming that the attackers had beaten them. Thankfully, their children were not at home, as they had gone to spend the weekend with their paternal grandparents. Jacqueline recounted that the night before, she and her husband had gone to a bar to unwind. After having a few drinks, they returned home after midnight. As Paul was about to open the front door, 3 masked individuals suddenly emerged from the shadows and forced their way inside. The intruders, armed with a gun, restrained the couple, physically attacked them, demanded money, and banned substance. Paul attempted to compromise with them, pleading for their release and promising not to contact the police. But this only made the attackers more aggressive. They struck him multiple times and began to suffocate him with a plastic bag, while Jacqueline looked on in horror. When the intruders realized there was no cash or illegal substances in the house, they decided to take the car, but inexplicably took Paul with them, leaving Jacqueline tied up and alone. After the criminals took Paul away, Jacqueline was able to reach the phone and call the police, using her toe to dial. She believed her husband might still be alive and urgently pleaded with the detectives to rescue him. Despite her frantic situation, Jacqueline seemed unusually calm, but the authorities found no reason to doubt her at the time. The investigators to start gathering evidence at the crime scene. They sought any information about the attackers, but Jacqueline stated that the criminals wore masks and she couldn't remember any distinguishing features like their clothing, speech, or physical traits. All she could confirm was that there were 3 male assailants. By Monday morning, less than a day after the attack, the search had begun. The Crimble family's car was found abandoned 3 miles from their home, parked in a deserted alley next to an empty house. Inside the trunk, authorities discovered the mutilated body of Paul. He showed clear signs of beating and torture. His hands were tied behind his back, his legs were bound with a cable tie, and his body was marked with numerous bruises. These criminals left no evidence behind, which was odd. When Jacqueline was informed about this horrifying discovery, she remained calm. It seemed that the violent loss of her husband, the father of her children, did not affect her much. Although she attempted to show surprise and grief, she did not shed a single tear and instead asked when she would be able to get her car back. Her unusual reaction raised suspicions, leading the police to scrutinize her. At first, Jacqueline's story was accepted without question and regarded as the only trustworthy version of events. However, her odd behavior as a widowed mother of 2 raised doubts among law enforcement, leading them to suspect she might be dishonest. Investigations revealed that her marriage to Paul had been deteriorating for a long time, and she was not an exemplary wife or mother. Neighbors, acquaintances, even her own children and parents had negative things to say about her. Additionally, it emerged that Jacqueline had been involved with a man named Roger Ferguson for several months. Roger, who lived with his mother on a farm in Armagh, was frequently seen with Jacqueline at various entertainment spots in town, where they were drinking. He would also visit her at home while her husband was at work and the children were at school and daycare. A day after the disfigured body was discovered in a car, Jacqueline went from being seen as a victim to the primary suspect, with Roger now viewed as a potential accomplice. While there were no reports of suspicious individuals seen in town, Nearly everyone who had interacted with the victim shared negative opinions about her. It was soon discovered that the deceased man had an insurance policy worth $300,000 British pound, which would go to his wife upon his death. This created a potential motive for the investigation. Before, Jacqueline stated that she was able to call for help by using her toe on a button phone. However, during the first inspection of the crime scene, investigators observed that the phone was on the coffee table face down, while her hands were tied behind her back. This made it impossible for her to have flipped the phone over after making the call or to have dialed for help if it had been in that position from the beginning. Their computer search history showed unusual inquiries. Someone had been searching for information about life insurance payouts and procedures related to the death of a policyholder for several months. When Jacqueline was questioned about this, she insisted she had no knowledge of it and suggested that Paul might be interested. Roger, suspected of being an accomplice in the crime, had a strong alibi. His mother stated that he had stayed home all night because he was feeling unwell. She mentioned that, around 1:30 a.m., she was looking in the medicine cabinet for something to treat his stomach problems. Despite her convincing account, police did not remove her son from the list of suspects. The police tracked the suspects' locations on the night of the crime using their cell phone signals and found that Roger was not at home, as his mother had claimed. Instead, he was at the Crimble's house for several hours. Roger continued his relationship with Jacqueline, and they were seen together at a bar the day after Paul's funeral. Interestingly, Jacqueline and Roger also visited a car dealership together to look at SUVs and discuss financing options for such a costly purchase. Roger's mother was with them during this visit, which raised further suspicions. The police believed that they had already made plans for how to use the insurance money following Paul's death, and they suspected that Roger's mother was likely aware of this. During interrogations, Jacqueline maintained that she never cheated on her husband and had no intention of harming him, but no one believed her anymore. Before the tragedy, she had started a job as a caregiver at a nursing home, but was fired within weeks due to ongoing conflicts and dishonesty. Despite this, she didn't inform her husband and pretended to go to work or have night shifts while staying at her lover Roger's house. Her deception was uncovered by chance when Paul met one of Jacqueline's former colleagues, who revealed the truth to him. When Paul confronted Jacqueline, it led to another heated argument. She threatened to leave him for her lover, take the children, and prevent him from interacting with them, which became Paul's biggest fear. To avoid losing his family, he chose to overlook her infidelity and could only confide in his closest friend, who later served as a witness in court, recounting Paul's situation. A cunning plan was in the works. Roger was not very bright. He was somewhat gullible and easily influenced. Jacqueline quickly took control over him, using her charm to make him do whatever she wanted. He would readily fight for her, which made her feel important. He was likely in love with her and believed everything she said. Meanwhile, Jacqueline complained to Roger about her husband, claiming he was rude, cruel, even abusive. Although these accusations were untrue, with each complaint, Roger grew to hate Paul more, thinking he was hurting Jacqueline and was the main reason for their unhappiness. Jacqueline planted the idea in Roger's mind that if her husband were gone, all their problems would disappear, allowing them to be together while also gaining a significant amount of money for a comfortable life. About 2 weeks before the tragedy, Jacqueline looked for people to help her commit the crime for money. However, after thinking it over, she and Roger decided against that plan. They believed they could do it themselves without leaving evidence or witnesses, ensuring they would receive the full insurance payout. On Friday, June 18th, Jacqueline took the children to spend the weekend with their grandparents. On Saturday, she encouraged her husband, Paul, to go out for drinks, to unwind and have a conversation. Paul happily agreed, believing it could improve their relationship, but he didn't realize it was a setup for something far worse. That night, patrons at the bar observed Jacqueline making significant efforts to intoxicate her husband, who doesn't drink. She bought multiple drinks and nearly forced him to take one shot after another. After midnight, she helped her unsteady husband leave the bar, and they were captured on surveillance cameras. This was the last time Paul was seen alive. The investigation uncovered a major timing issue. The bar was a 10-minute walk from the Krimble home, and the attack happened right after they returned, lasting no more than 15 minutes. Jacqueline stated that her husband was kidnapped afterward and taken away in their car, prompting her to call the police immediately. However, there was a gap of about an hour and a half between when they were captured on camera and when she contacted the police. Investigators suspected that this time was used by the perpetrators to cover up their actions and make the attack appear to have been committed by other individuals. Additionally, it seemed that Jacqueline deliberately got her husband drunk so he would be unable to fight back. She claimed that the attackers kicked Paul while he was incapacitated and then began to strangle him by placing a plastic bag over his head and securing it with tape. The injuries found on the deceased confirmed her story, but by that point, the police were almost certain that the attackers were Jacqueline and her lover, Roger Ferguson. After a thorough investigation of the crime scene, clear evidence was uncovered. Detectives found a partially erased footprint of a man's shoe that had been poorly cleaned. The tread pattern matched Roger's shoes, but this alone is considered circumstantial evidence. More concrete evidence against the criminal couple emerged as well. In the kitchen trash, detectives discovered a cigarette butt with Roger's saliva on it, and a partial fingerprint from him was located on the cable tie that bound Jacqueline's hands. Additionally, Roger's fingerprints were found on the ties that bound the victim's hands and feet. The bag used to suffocate the victim contained sweat and oil traces from both of the suspects. The investigation revealed another person involved in this violent crime, Colin Robinson, 17, a minor acquaintance of Roger. On the night of the attack, Roger called Colin to ask for an unspecified favor. Following Roger's instructions, Colin parked his car at the end of the street and walked to the house to avoid drawing attention. However, when Colin realized the situation, he wanted to escape, but Roger threatened him with a knife and coerced him into helping move the body into the car's trunk. Afterward, they drove the car to a secluded area and abandoned it. Initially, Colin denied any involvement in the crime, but during a second interrogation, he broke down and started to confess. The trial and sentencing took place after a thorough investigation that lasted several months. During this period, investigators collected solid evidence, interviewed witnesses, and obtained a confession from the third person involved in the crime. However, the trial only started in spring 2007, nearly 3 years after Paul Krimble was killed. On May 7, 2007, Jacqueline Krimble and Roger Ferguson were convicted of premeditated murder with the intent of collecting insurance money. Jacqueline received a 20-year prison sentence, while Roger, her lover and accomplice, was sentenced to 18 years. Colin Robinson, the young accomplice, received a 3-year sentence for aiding the criminals and trying to conceal the criminal. Additionally, Roger's elderly mother was also held accountable for perjury and giving a false alibi for her son. Given her old age and serious health issues, she was sentenced to only 1 year of probation. Jacqueline sought revenge on her own children. Even while in prison, she felt bitterness towards her family for not supporting her during her trial and for their relief at her imprisonment. Her own mother even stated that people like Jacqueline should be kept away from society to prevent them from causing harm. Strikingly, just days after her husband's funeral, Jacqueline destroyed all of his belongings and photographs, wanting nothing to remind her of him. However, Danielle managed to save a few pictures of her father, hiding them in her bedside table without her mother's knowledge. The £300,000 British pound insurance payout, for which Paul was murdered, went to his children. The children lost both of their parents in an instant, but their difficulties continued. Their mother was fiercely opposed to allowing either her parents or the parents of her deceased husband to take care of them. She fought hard to deny them guardianship rights, which led to the children entering foster care, even though they had living grandparents. At the time of the tragedy, Danielle was just 11 years old. and her brother was only 5. Jacqueline managed to keep her parental rights and tried to manipulate her children from prison. She wanted them to publicly claim her innocence and used various pressure tactics to do so. For instance, she promised to approve their school trips if they visited her in prison, but she tricked them. During the visit, she insisted they testify for her and refused to sign the permission slip. As a result, they were the only ones in their class who couldn't go on weekend trips. Danielle is now living in Basingstoke, working at a daycare and in a relationship with Simon Bryce, an engineer, her brother, who has a solid education and has relocated to London. The harrowing tale of Jacqueline and Paul Crimble underscores the devastating consequences of a marriage sustained by obligation rather than love, trust, or respect. Jacqueline's calculated murder of her husband, driven by greed for a £300,000 British insurance payout, and executed with chilling ruthlessness alongside her lover, Roger Ferguson, not only claimed Paul's life, but also irreparably fractured their family. The children, Danielle, and her younger brother were left to grapple with the loss of their devoted father and the betrayal of a mother whose cruelty persisted even from behind bars. Despite inheriting the insurance money, no financial remedy could heal the emotional wounds inflicted by Jacqueline's actions or restore the stability stolen from their childhoods. This case serves as a stark cautionary tale. Clinging to a toxic relationship under the guise of duty or societal pressure can lead to catastrophic outcomes, leaving a trail of heartbreak and irreparable loss. Larissa Rodriguez grew up in a humble but close-knit family. Her parents were modest and reserved. They raised her with strong values of integrity, a strong work ethic, and family loyalty. From an early age, Larissa showed remarkable discipline. She trained in gymnastics, later graduated with a degree in sports science, and worked as a trainer and instructor at a fitness club. She led a healthy lifestyle, avoided harmful habits, meticulously cared for her well-being. She had only one serious relationship with Luis Antonio Garnica, who became her first partner and later her husband. To the family, he seemed quiet and polite. Larissa believed in the ideal of a strong family, and despite strains in their relationship, she remained committed to preserving the marriage. Luis came from a well-off background. His father had served as mayor of Pontal, and Luis himself was trained in medicine. But behind that veneer of success, he was self-centered and calculating. According to Larissa's relatives, at the beginning of their relationship, he had no steady income and depended on Larissa's mother, who sent him home, cooked meals over time. Despite having a diploma, his finances never improved, and he struggled to support 2 parallel lives, his official marriage and a secret relationship. His standing among Larissa's friends and family deteriorated. He grew increasingly withdrawn, distant, and indifferent. Even during Larissa's mother's final days, he visited only when forced. In the last months of the marriage, Luis was emotionally detached, cold, and often degraded his wife about her appearance, avoiding any real communication. Despite her efforts to reconcile, he continued to move further away, ignoring the obvious signs of their relationship's crisis. Elizabete Arabaza, Luis's mother, played a pivotal role in this story. At 68, she appeared quiet and unassuming, but in reality, she was a manipulator with a troubling history. Her former husband and her daughter claimed she had a gambling problem and was deeply in debt. There were suspicions surrounding her involvement in the mysterious death of a relative connected through financial dealings. She often asked acquaintances for money and was suspected of selling others' jewelry. Her behavior within the Garnica family drew mixed opinions. With Larissa, she maintained the image of a caring mother-in-law, yet she regularly shared confidential information with her son and withheld crucial details from her daughter-in-law. Over time, it became clear she had played a decisive role in tearing the family apart and setting the stage for the tragic events that followed. These 3 figures, Larissa, Luis, and Elizabete, became the central players in a chain of events whose outcomes were irreversible. In the spring of 2025, tensions between Larissa and Luis escalated dramatically. Their conflicts had become a regular occurrence, and any remaining trust was shattered. Luis's behavior grew increasingly distant. He often claimed to be working late or on call, but in reality, he was frequently meeting with another woman named Leticia. Larissa didn't know the woman's name at first, but she began to suspect he was seeing someone else, especially after noticing odd changes in his routine and his frequent irritation for no clear reason. Her suspicions were confirmed after she discreetly followed him one evening in mid-March. Larissa spotted Luis heading toward Letitia's house on a night he claimed to be working an overnight shift. Not long after that, she found personal items in his car, along with a medical-grade anesthetic, which clearly indicated a secretive relationship. She confided in Elizabeth, her mother-in-law, hoping for understanding. Instead, Elizabeth quickly told Luis about the confrontation and criticized Larissa for spying on him. Rather than receiving comfort, Larissa was told that being unfaithful is just something men do. Larissa didn't act on impulse. Despite her personal disappointment, she still tried to preserve her family. According to her father, she wanted to have a calm conversation with Luis and find a peaceful resolution. Over the next few days, she spoke privately with close friends about the possibility of divorce, but asked them not to get involved. Meanwhile, a friend offered her temporary use of an unoccupied apartment to help her take a step back and think things through. On March 15, 2025, Larissa tells Luis of her decision to end the marriage. She also confirmed her intentions to a trusted friend. Her goal was to reduce tension and prepare for a respectful separation. The following day, March 16th, Elizabeth Arabata began researching highly toxic substances online. That same day, she offered Larissa homemade soup. Larissa, unaware of any danger, accepted the meal. Within hours, she began experiencing severe gastrointestinal symptoms, including cramps and nausea. Despite feeling unwell, Larissa assumed the discomfort was caused by stress or possibly spoiled food. On March 18th, Larissa once again opened up to a close friend, expressing how drained she felt physically and emotionally. She said her energy was slipping away and shared her concern that Luis continued to avoid any meaningful conversation. At the same time, Elizabeth, his mother, became unusually attentive, bringing food, initiating frequent visits, and insisting on helping Larissa, despite previously criticizing her for wanting to leave the marriage. By March 19th, Larissa confided in a relative about her worsening condition. She described sudden chills, weakness, abdominal pain, and an overwhelming sense of dread. She noted that she had never experienced anything like it before, and that the symptoms had persisted for several days. That message would become one of the last times she discussed her health. On March 20th, Larissa told her father she no longer saw a future in the marriage. Though she was still hoping to avoid a public fallout, she wanted the divorce to be amicable, if possible. That day, Elizabeth seemed calm but continued bringing over food. Larissa, although feeling unwell, didn't yet suspect a link between the meals and her condition. She assumed her health issues stemmed from emotional stress. Then came March 21st. Elizabeth arrived again with homemade soup. Larissa's condition took a drastic turn for the worse. By late that evening, she stopped responding to calls and messages. A few hours later, the devastating news came. She had passed away. On the morning of March 22nd, 2025, Luis reported that he had found his wife unconscious in their apartment. He claimed he'd just returned from a night shift, walked in, and found Larissa lying on the floor. According to his account, he immediately began CPR and called emergency services. However, discrepancies between his story and the actual evidence began to surface within hours of the investigation. One critical detail was a message Luis sent to Leticia. At 10:25 m.m., he texted Leticia to tell her that Larissa had passed away. Just 9 minutes later, at 10:34 m., paramedics arrived. Yet when they entered, Luis was still performing resuscitation efforts, claiming Larissa was showing signs of life. The medical team quickly determined otherwise. she was already in a state of rigor mortis, making revival impossible. Emergency personnel documented that her body was cold, with no pulse or breathing, and her skin showed clear signs consistent with an extended time of death. When police arrived at the scene, one of the first things they noted was Louise's insistence on a rapid cremation. He didn't notify Larissa's family right away about her passing and took it upon himself to begin arranging the necessary paperwork for cremation. This immediately raised red flags for investigators, especially since Larissa's cultural background strictly followed burial traditions, with cremation never being considered. At the scene, officers noticed that the environment had been tampered with, bed sheets had been stripped, rolled up towels with what appeared to be reddish stains were found nearby, and the laundry basket contained items possibly used for cleanup. The paramedic examining Larissa's body took note of undigested food in her stomach. This detail would later become a critical piece of evidence, prompting a full toxicology analysis. The initial assumption of a sudden cardiac event began to shift toward concerns about a possible poisoning. Louise's behavior on the day Larissa died seemed artificial, as if he were acting to make her death look like a sudden accident. The timeline, the messages he sent, and his behavior before and after emergency services arrived painted a picture that seemed increasingly rehearsed. At first glance, Louise seemed like a distraught husband caught in a crisis, but as investigators dug deeper, examining documents, message logs, and expert findings, the surface narrative started to unravel. Attention shifted from simply understanding what happened to examining who may have played a role in the moments immediately after Larissa's life ended. Following the official announcement of Larissa's death, Louise came under increasing scrutiny. Within just 24 hours of the incident, his actions raised serious concerns. The day after Larissa's passing, attempted financial transactions were discovered using her bank accounts. Louise used her debit card to purchase items at a pharmacy and attempted to withdraw cash from an ATM. Several of these transactions were flagged and declined due to suspicious activity. One attempt to access her savings account failed because of automatic security blocks. Later, bank officials confirmed that the attempted transactions originated from devices registered to Louise. At a local bank branch in Pontal, a teller reported an unusual request. Viviani, Louise's sister, attempted to obtain account information for Larissa. Despite having no legal authority to access those records, Larissa's account was registered in a different region, and Viviani's attempt to retrieve private financial data without a formal power of attorney was officially logged as an unauthorized access attempt. This incident immediately drew the attention of investigators. Meanwhile, Larissa's family, especially her brother and father, pushed for a thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding her death. Troubled by rumors and inconsistencies, Larissa's brother sought legal counsel from attorney. Consultations with legal representatives began on March 24th, 2 days after her death. Despite online speculation suggesting Larissa may have taken her own life, her loved ones firmly rejected that possibility. According to those close to her, Larissa had no history of mental health struggles, maintained an active lifestyle, was in therapy, and had clear plans for her future, including filing for divorce. The attorney hired by Larissa's family demanded that no cremation take place until a full toxicological analysis was completed. This move proved critical to the case. The pathologist ordered a comprehensive examination, including toxicology screenings. While the initial exam did not pinpoint an immediate cause of death, the lab tests became central to developing the leading theory. At the same time, investigators focused on digital evidence. Combing through text messages, GPS data, and call logs, recovered chats between Louise, Viviani, and others provided deeper insight. One particularly telling exchange showed Viviani advising Louise to be cautious with their phones and not to confuse devices. In another message, she reminded him to mention a supposed history of heart conditions in Larissa's family when speaking to authorities. These texts were interpreted as an attempt to shape a false narrative and create a medically plausible explanation for what had occurred. While the investigation remained active, the family's lawyer successfully petitioned to freeze all of Larissa's financial accounts and restrict access to her assets. Authorities across relevant agencies were notified. These legal safeguards were essential in preventing further unauthorized actions by Luis and those allegedly working with him. At this point, investigators completely ruled out end her own life. Every move Louise and Viviani made following Larissa's passing appeared calculated, aimed at reducing exposure and covering their tracks. These patterns were sufficient to launch the formal phase of criminal proceedings. Roughly 1 month before Larissa passed away, another family member died under mysterious circumstances, Natalia, daughter of Elisabetti. At the time, the incident received no public attention. Natalia lived in Pontal with a long-term partner in a domestic relationship. Shortly before her death, she had a major falling out with her mother. Elisabetti strongly opposed Natalia's plans to start a family and become a parent. Their arguments centered around inheritance issues and shares in the family business. Following the disagreement, Natalia's partner left the house, leaving her alone with Elisabetti, something relatives later described as highly unusual. In the days that followed, Natalia complained of feeling increasingly unwell. However, Elisabetti never sought medical help or contacted emergency services. Instead, she reached out to Louise and Viviani, who were in another city at the time. The drive from Ribeirão Preto to Pontal takes approximately 40 minutes. During this time, Natalia remained without assistance. By the time Louise and Viviani arrived, Natalia's condition had deteriorated significantly. She was later taken to a hospital where she died. Eyewitnesses claimed that despite his medical training, Louise didn't advocate for emergency care and seemed more focused on when the death certificate would be issued. This detail was documented and became the subject of further investigation. Initially, Natalia's death was classified as natural, but as Larissa's case unfolded, new findings began to cast serious doubt on that conclusion. One red flag was the unexplained death of Natalia's dog. 2 weeks before the tragedy, relatives reported that the dog had no known health issues. Authorities approved the exhumation of the pet for toxicology testing based on the theory that poison might have been tested on the animal. Natalia's father, Antonio, revealed during questioning that Elisabetti was facing serious financial problems. He stated Elisabetti had debts exceeding 300,000 reais, some of which were linked to gambling. Natalia held a 16% share in the family business, which, because she had no dependent children, passed directly to her mother upon her death. Antonio also testified that not long before she passed, Natalia had mentioned receiving threats from her mother regarding her personal life. Elisabetti's alleged efforts to secure full control over those assets led to major tensions with her ex-husband. Further disturbing details emerged about Elisabetti's past. Years earlier, a friend recalled a strange episode. After having tea with Elisabetti, she experienced sharp abdominal pain, followed by unconsciousness. Emergency care saved her, and doctors later suspected a toxic substance had been involved. However, that case was never formally investigated. As Larissa's story gained public attention, more people connected to the Garnica family began stepping forward, sharing concerns about Elisabetti's behavior. After reviewing the series of suspicious patterns, investigators reached a preliminary conclusion. Natalia may have been the first confirmed victim, and her dog potentially part of a test run for what followed. The combination of poisoning, delayed medical response, concealed symptoms, and a motive rooted in inheritance formed a disturbing picture. From this point forward, the case took on a much broader scope. A deeper analysis of these incidents revealed a consistent pattern in Elisabetti's financial behavior. She repeatedly sought new sources of income, pressured those close to her, and manipulated legal access to property and assets. After Natalia and Larissa passed, these tactics intensified in the context of mounting debts and financial instability. Her motives became a central focus of the investigation. Amid the dual investigations into the deaths of Larissa and Natalia, law enforcement began uncovering information that hinted at additional potentially criminal episodes linked to Elisabetta Arrabate. The case involved a woman who had been friendly with Elisabetta. Years after an odd incident, she finally spoke out. Following a tea visit at Elisabetta's home, she suddenly felt dizzy, nauseous, and disoriented. Elisabetta offered her a headache remedy, a blue capsule. She took the pill, but was later hospitalized that night with suspected poisoning. Doctors documented toxic exposure to an unknown substance, but the woman never filed a report at the time. She later admitted she was afraid of becoming entangled in legal battles. Eventually, she reached out to Larissa's family attorney after media reports surfaced about possible poisonings. Yet another concerning event came to light. Elisabetta had attempted to obtain power of attorney from a woman expecting to receive court-ordered compensation. The woman, alarmed by Elisabetta's persistence, later told investigators she feared she might have been a future target. Her statement was formally included in the case files. According to law enforcement, a clear pattern was beginning to emerge in Elisabetta's actions. She would first establish close relationships with financially stable women, earn their trust, and shortly afterward, they would suffer sudden and unexplained health issues. Given these accounts, investigators began pursuing a new theory. They might be dealing with a series of connected incidents rather than isolated ones. Law enforcement officials issued a public appeal, urging anyone who had experienced suspicious behavior from Elisabetta Arrabate to contact authorities. Once the toxicology reports came in, the investigation entered a decisive phase. Forensic specialists confirmed the presence of a compound derived from chumbinho, a banned toxic substance in Larissa's system. This finding was pivotal. Until then, Louise and Elisabetta had claimed that Larissa passed away from natural causes, but the chemical evidence completely debunked their story. Another critical piece of the puzzle came from surveillance footage at the residential complex. Security cameras showed that, on the morning of March 22nd, Louise arrived at the apartment later than he had claimed, and Viviani arrived shortly before emergency services were called. These details directly contradicted their official statements. Taken together, the presence of a toxic compound, suspicious online searches, misleading explanations, tampered evidence, and timeline inconsistencies formed a clear chain of evidence. Investigators concluded that Larissa's death was not a random event, but a carefully coordinated act carried out by multiple individuals. The evidence didn't just suggest wrongdoing, it presented a legally viable case of premeditated criminal activity. By mid-April 2025, the investigation reached the stage of formal charges. Based on forensic data, digital correspondence, and verified discrepancies in witness accounts, police filed charges against three primary individuals: Elisabetta Arrabate, Luis Garnica, and his sister, Viviani Garnica. The main charge involved the intentional death of Larissa Rodriguez through poisoning. Investigators determined that Elisabetta had prepared Larissa's meals in the final days of her life, actively researched toxic substances, created a plan to conceal the act, and coordinated the actions of her family members. Luis was charged as an accomplice. He was aware of his mother's intentions, failed to intervene, concealed signs of poisoning, and helped destroy evidence afterward. He was also the one who pushed for rapid cremation, a move that could have eliminated the chance of detecting any toxic substances. Viviani was also named as an accomplice. Her role included coordination with her brother, erasing digital traces, attempting to access the victim's bank accounts, and helping conceal key details surrounding the incident. Recovered messages from her phone confirmed that she knew about Larissa's death in advance and was involved in planning how to speak with law enforcement and medical professionals. Simultaneously, a separate investigation was launched into the circumstances surrounding Natalia's passing. Another contributing factor was the earlier death of Natalia's dog, which had also raised alarms. While formal charges in Natalia's case had not yet been filed, the evidence was placed in a separate investigative file. The charges against all three individuals were formally submitted to the district attorney's office. Each was summoned for questioning. Following the interrogation, Both Elisabetta and Louise were taken into custody. Viviani was placed under travel restrictions, required to remain within the region, and ordered to surrender her passport. Meanwhile, the court approved a request to seize Garnica family assets and freeze all accounts tied to the suspects. The case sparked significant public interest. Journalists, advocacy groups, and legal experts began a national conversation about the shortcomings in addressing domestic aggression, legal loopholes in women's protection, and missed warning signs. Many pointed out that the tragedy might have been avoided had social services intervened earlier. At this point, the charges have been formally established, and the investigation has completed the collection of core evidence. Next, the trial will proceed, with the expectation of revealing the whole truth to the public. Christopher Moyer was born on May 21, 1967, into a middle-class family. He valued independence and believed that education was the key to achieving it. Although he didn't have many friends, this didn't bother him much, as he spent most of his free time studying. After finishing school, he attended college, where he developed a strong interest in computers and technology. His dream was to become self-employed after earning his degree. Beyond his career goals, he also dreamed of starting a family. By 2010, Christopher was 44 years old and had realized his aspirations. He was self-employed, working as his own boss, and happily married. He lived in a spacious house in Pennsylvania with his wife and son. He worked as a freelance computer specialist, assembling custom computers for clients from his home. His wife, Irina Moyer, was skilled in electronics and assisted him with his work. She was born on August 12, 1971, which made her 39 years old in 2010. Irina was originally from Ukraine and had moved to the United States in search of a better life. She met Christopher in April 2002 during a challenging time in his life. He was going through a difficult divorce from his first wife, with whom he had no children. This experience left Christopher longing for a large, loving family. Irina also shares this dream and hopes to build a new life in the United States. Their relationship developed quickly, and later that same year, they decided to get married. They began planning for their future, which included moving out of Christopher's bachelor home to a place more suitable for a family. Before they could find a new home, Irina discovered she was pregnant. In 2003, they purchased a large, cozy house in a quiet suburb of Orrington. The area was peaceful, scenic, and much safer than the bustling city where Christopher had previously lived. Although the local residents formed a close-knit community, the Moyers were more reserved, choosing to keep to themselves. Over the years, neighbors described them as withdrawn and rarely seen in the neighborhood. While they didn't socialize or attend local gatherings, they weren't entirely disconnected. For example, Christopher once arranged for shared use of a snowblower with his neighbors. However, in most cases, the family preferred solving problems independently. On September 25, 2003, Irina gave birth to their first and only child, Dylan Moyer. By 2010, Dylan was 7 years old and thriving in school. Having successfully completed the first grade, he was a bright, intelligent child, and his parents were incredibly proud of him. Teachers, both from his kindergarten and primary school, regularly praised Dylan for his abilities. Much of his success stemmed from the active involvement of both his parents in his education. Being highly educated themselves, Christopher and Irina prioritized their son's learning and supported him every step of the way. While they avoided participating in the neighborhood's social life, they always attended school meetings together, demonstrating their dedication to helping Dylan succeed in both academics and life. Christopher was known as a calm, grounded individual, and his wife, Irina, shared many of his qualities. Both were thoughtful and quiet, preferring action over conversation. Their closest neighbor, Rose Radziul, knew them better than anyone else in the area. Although they were on friendly terms, Rose described Christopher and Irina as reserved, meek, and silent. Their interactions with her rarely extended beyond simple greetings and polite exchanges. Notably, Rose noticed that Christopher had a tendency to be controlling and domineering towards Irina. She noticed that Irina seemed to become more withdrawn when she was with Christopher, often avoiding communication so as not to upset him. Their son, Dylan, however, was different. Teachers regarded him as an exceptionally bright and curious boy. By kindergarten, he had a vocabulary beyond his years and often impressed or puzzled adults with his questions. Dylan's primary school teacher was particularly fond of him, recognizing his great potential early on. Instead of playing typical games for children his age, Dylan showed an interest in scientific literature, often reading during his free time. Like his parents, he was not highly social, but he maintained good relationships with his peers. Irina was described as a loving and devoted mother who prioritized her son's well-being and development. Despite her shy and unsociable personality, Christopher, similarly, was regarded as a caring father, deeply invested in Dylan's well-being. According to relatives, the family had created a warm and nurturing home environment, rooted in love for each other and their child. A few months before the tragedy, the family had even taken a trip to Disneyland, making the events of June 17, 2011 all the more shocking. At 9:40 p.m. on that fateful Friday, 44-year-old Christopher called emergency services. He calmly confessed to killing his wife and son with a baseball bat, stating that both were dead and refusing to offer any first aid. His cold and detached tone during the call was unsettling, as if he were discussing something mundane. He gave a detailed account of the crime, describing how he had killed Irina by beating her to death before attacking their son Dylan. He even supplied his personal information and the family's home address, thanked the dispatcher, and hung up. Emergency responders rushed to the Moyer family home, where they encountered a chilling scene. When no one answered the door, authorities initially suspected Christopher had barricaded himself inside and might be armed. A note taped outside listed the names and contact details of relatives, suggesting that Christopher had prepared for what was to come. Neighbors began to gather, watching the tense situation unfold. The police believed Christopher might resist arrest, but then someone noticed one of the family's cars was missing. This raised the possibility that Christopher had fled. By 2 a.m., officers entered the home through an open garage door. They proceeded cautiously, weapons drawn, but found no one alive inside. Instead, they were met with a gruesome scene. On the second floor, they discovered two bodies, 7-year-old Dylan and 39-year-old Irina. Both had suffered severe head trauma from a blunt object, their skulls brutally disfigured. Irina's body was found in the bathroom adjacent to the main bedroom. Bloodstains and drag marks suggested that her body had been moved there after the attack. A towel was also placed over her face, a gruesome detail that added to the haunting scene. Christopher, however, was nowhere to be found. Dylan's room was nearby. He was found in his bedroom with injuries similar to those of Irina. A bloody baseball bat, believed to be the murder weapon, was lying next to his body. The bat was sent to a lab for analysis, as the caller on the emergency line had predicted. The police activity quickly attracted the attention of the neighbors, especially Rose, who was close to the family. When Rose goes to find out what is going on, she is horrified by the brutal attack on the Moyer family, and is even more shocked when she hears Christopher confess over the phone that he killed his own family. The police immediately questioned Rose, hoping she might have heard or seen something since she was at home during the time of the murders. However, Rose stated that she hadn't heard any screams or disturbances, only the sound of a car engine leaving the Moyer residence, which she assumed was Christopher fleeing the scene. She also noted that she hadn't noticed anything unusual or any warning signs of such a violent event. Rose shared detailed information about the family, with the police being particularly interested in Christopher, who was missing. They needed to determine the direction he might have gone in and whether he had taken a weapon with him, as one neighbor had suggested. Christopher had reportedly told the emergency dispatcher that he planned to wait for the police to arrive. Yet, for reasons unknown, he was gone by the time officers reached the crime scene. Rose described Christopher as calm and introverted, adding that she couldn't imagine him committing such an atrocity. She noted that, although he wasn't very affectionate towards his wife, they seemed happy in public, and she had never seen him argue with his wife or scold his son. Forensic experts and detectives thoroughly combed the crime scene, working to piece together what had transpired. No signs of a break-in were discovered, and all the available evidence pointed to Christopher's responsibility for the attack. Fearing that his mental state had deteriorated and that he might harm someone else, authorities launched an urgent manhunt. Despite this, Christopher's actions didn't fit the profile of a typical serial killer or maniac. 2 hours after police arrived at the house, they were still searching intensively for Christopher. They tried reaching him on his mobile phone, but he didn't respond to any calls. During the investigation, security footage from a nearby camera captured Christopher's car, narrowing down the potential routes he could have taken. Road services and patrol units were alerted and stationed at strategic points in an effort to intercept him. Yet Christopher seemed to have vanished. At 12:56 a.m., a witness from a neighboring town called Hadborough rang the police. The caller, a train engineer, reported finding a body on the railway tracks. Tragically, the man on the tracks matched Christopher's description. According to the engineer, the train was unable to stop in time to avoid hitting the man. Authorities arrived at the scene and found a body, later identified as Christopher, through documents found in his possession. His pocket contained $300 in cash and car keys. A dark Toyota Camry, registered to Christopher, was located near the railroad crossing. The police concluded that Christopher had deliberately ended his life shortly after the murders. He appeared to have been familiar with the train's schedule and intentionally positioned himself on the tracks to coincide with the arrival of an oncoming train. As a result, the entire Moyer family died, leaving many unanswered questions about this horrific incident. Irina's parents, along with her brother and sister-in-law, were in a neighboring town when the news broke. The police contacted them to inform them of the deaths of Irina, Dylan, and Christopher. During questioning, the family revealed that the Moyers had planned to visit them that weekend. According to their plans, Christopher, Irina, and Dylan were supposed to drive over on Saturday night. After the visit, Dylan was meant to stay with his grandparents for a few days, while his parents spent time alone together, with the grandparents later returning Dylan home. The tragic events, however, unfolded just days before this planned visit. Shortly before the tragic events, Irina's parents tried to call her, but their calls went unanswered. They were not overly concerned, assuming the family had gone to bed early to prepare for their long journey. Relatives of theirs stated that they had spoken with the Moyers on Friday morning, when both Irina and Christopher seemed cheerful and did not mention any issues. They were busy making final preparations for their trip. Neither Irina nor Christopher had a history of mental health problems, which made the tragic events even more shocking. Christopher's parents were also informed of the tragedy. His father reported speaking with him on the same day and noted nothing unusual or alarming. Christopher had mentioned extending a contract with a major client, which made him optimistic about his upcoming weekend plans and improving his financial situation. Their family had been dealing with financial struggles recently due to the instability of freelance work. Christopher had expressed concerns about potentially losing their home, but the issue appeared to have been resolved. It seemed he was simply worried that such financial difficulties could return. When friends and family were questioned, none could provide a motive for the tragedy. Christopher, described as a loving husband and father, seemed incapable of such violence. What could have driven him to kill his entire family and take his own life? Their family was private, rarely sharing details of their personal lives. The medical examiner's office conducted autopsies on Irina and Dylan. Both were found to have died from multiple blunt force head injuries inflicted with extreme force and determination. However, these findings provided no insight into why Christopher, a man with no history of depression or violent tendencies, would commit such a horrific act. Family members described Irina as loyal to her husband, leading a quiet life with minimal social interactions beyond her neighbors and her child's teachers. Their relationship was considered healthy and loving. Christopher was seen as a hard-working man who provided for his family and never displayed depressive behaviors or violent tendency. Adding to the mystery, Christopher left no suicide note to shed light on what led to this devastating act. Key documents found in the house revealed crucial details. Investigators discovered that the family was at risk of losing their $450,000 home. Christopher had received a foreclosure notice just days before the tragedy, and they lacked the funds to resolve their financial troubles. This crushing reality may have driven Christopher to despair. It is believed that he had planned to harm himself, but in his state of anguish and loss of reason, he could not bear to leave his wife and children to face poverty and hardship. He may have convinced himself that killing his family was a way to shield them from future suffering. Despite this theory, the exact motive remains uncertain. Detectives carefully examined all evidence and consulted psychiatric experts on such behavior. Typically, such actions are linked to underlying mental health problems. However, Christopher had no diagnosed mental health illnesses and exhibited no signs of significant struggles beforehand. Relatives shared that Christopher had been deeply stressed by financial issues. Their family had previously faced the threat of losing their home in 2006, but succeeded in overcoming the challenge. The family lived modestly, but this time, the situation appeared dire and irreparable. There was no evidence to suggest that Christopher had been struggling with severe mental health issues or that he had planned the tragedy long in advance. Experts instead believe the decision may have been impulsive, driven by the overwhelming tension that Christopher had quietly been battling on his own. Christopher's father was aware that his son would never seek help from a psychiatrist, no matter how severe the situation became. There had been a suspicion that Christopher might have used illegal substances, but this was proven false. Toxicological tests confirmed that his blood was clean. However, this detail provided another clue. Christopher was not taking any prescribed medication, indicating that he had avoided seeking medical help for his anxiety or other possible issues. The forensic investigation continued, uncovering troubling evidence. The blood found on a baseball bat near Dylan's body was identified as belonging to both Dylan and Irina. Fingerprints on the other end of the stick showed it was Christopher's. Besides, footprints and additional evidence from the family home allowed investigators to piece together the tragic sequence of events. The Friday morning when the tragedy unfolded had seemed normal, but Christopher had likely already made his decision. A trip was planned for the following day, and his wife and son went to bed early that evening. Christopher, however, stayed awake, unable to sleep. At some point, he retrieved a baseball bat from the garage and waited for his family to fall into a deep sleep. He did not want to make noise or raise suspicion. Christopher's actions suggested that he wanted to carry out his plans swiftly, though calling it humane would be a stretch. He first entered the bedroom he shared with his wife and attacked her suddenly. The first blow to her head caused fatal injuries, leaving her unable to scream or resist. Christopher proceeded to strike her multiple times, breaking her skull. He likely believed that ensuring her death quickly was necessary. Irina succumbed to internal bleeding within minutes, and forensic evidence showed that she had no defensive wounds, indicating she had been caught completely off guard. Next, Christopher turned to his son, Dylan, who was asleep in his room. He killed him in the same manner, with the boy unaware of what was happening. Afterward, Christopher dragged his wife's body to the bathroom adjacent to their bedroom, leaving a blood trail behind. The reason for this act remains unknown. Additionally, he covered her face with a towel, a gesture often associated with remorseful killers who cannot bear to look at the consequences of their actions. After the murders, Christopher did not immediately call emergency services. Instead, he wrote a note listing the contact information of family members, presumably to assist authorities in reaching them. He also sent a text message to his father, apologizing. At the time, his father had no idea what had occurred and did not understand the gravity of the message. The violent events were entirely unexpected and shocking. even to those closest to Christopher. After bidding farewell to his family and leaving behind clues, Christopher called 911 to confess his actions. However, he did not wait for the police to arrive. He needed to act quickly to position himself at a reachable section of the train tracks before it was too late. This urgency may explain why he left no explanation for his actions in his note. He also chose not to leave a will, possibly because the family possessed very few valuables. Only 2 cars remained. Their most valuable property had already been lost, and they had no savings. A key document found in the house provided critical insight into the double murder. It revealed that the family had been struggling with financial problems for an extended period. Christopher's freelance work was insufficient to support a family of 3. Years earlier, he had faced the risk of losing their home for the first time. Thankfully, they managed to make the necessary payments in 2006 and kept their house. However, their financial situation deteriorated further in 2010. By September of that year, debts were mounting once again. Family members and neighbors suspected that the financial troubles were linked to money and real estate. Unfortunately, Christopher had kept his struggles private and did not ask for help, so no one realized how severe their situation had become, not even his relatives. Psychiatric experts concluded that Christopher decided to kill his family when he realized they were unable to escape their financial difficulties. In his distorted reasoning, he believed that taking their lives was the only way to spare them from a life of poverty. His disturbed state of mind led him to view this act as a twisted form of mercy. After the investigation was concluded, the case was closed. Irina and Dylan Moyer were buried together in Pennsylvania, near a city nearby. There is less information available about Christopher's funeral, but it is known that he was buried separately, far from his wife and child. Irina's family insisted on this, as they believed it was unfair to bury the murderer with Irina and Dylan. Tynesha Stewart was born on July 10, 1987. Her childhood was not very peaceful. Her parents divorced when she was very young, and at just 6 years old, she faced her first major tragedy, the death of her father from a brain aneurysm. Following the divorce, her mother, Gail, remarried. Her stepfather was caring, and soon she became an older sister. Despite this difficult beginning, Tynesha grew up in a loving family that valued and supported one another. The family lived in Borders Village, Texas. As a child, she was organized, responsible, and did well in school. Like many teenagers, she struggled with self-doubt and insecurities, which led to conflicts with her stepfather. However, as she matured, she worked to overcome these challenges and turned her weaknesses into strengths. Tynesha was ambitious and dreamed of achieving something extraordinary. In high school, despite not enjoying sports, she made her mark as the basketball team's manager, helping lead the players outside of the game. Her talent for singing also shone through as she performed the national anthem at school games. Drawn to music, she even created a music group with friends at school, balancing academics, extracurricular activities, and part-time work. Tynesha was highly driven. According to the school director, she was one of the most ambitious students, taking steps every day to get closer to her dreams. Tynesha's ultimate goal was to attend Texas A&M University and become a construction engineer. Thanks to her excellent performance in high school, she earned scholarships totaling $40,000. Determination and effort helped her achieve many significant accomplishments. But it was also these very qualities that made the events that followed even more heartbreaking. Tynesha's first serious relationship was with Curtis, a handsome and popular middle school student. He adored her, treating her like the most important person in the world. They were inseparable, attending school events and even their graduation night together. Many admired their relationship and wished to be in Tynesha's shoes. However, as with many young love stories, their relationship was unpredictable. They experienced ups and downs, but remained close. Curtis cared deeply for Tynesha and always wanted the best for her. Everything changed during Tynesha's third year of college. While working part-time at a pizzeria, she met Timothy Wayne Shepard, a delivery driver. There was an instant connection between them. She ended her on-again, off-again relationship with Curtis and started dating Timothy. This time, the relationship felt more serious. However, there was a secret that Tynesha kept hidden for a long time. Timothy was 8 years older than her. He was 24, while she was only 16 when they started dating. Fearing her parents' disapproval, she didn't tell her parents about their age difference. Unaware of this, Tynesha's family welcomed Timothy with open arms. Her mother, stepfather, and sister grew to love him and thought the relationship might lead to marriage. Timothy became a regular presence at family gatherings and even bonded with Tynesha's younger sister. Eventually, they began living together. When Tynesha graduated from high school in 2006 and enrolled at Texas A&M University, she and Timothy decided to maintain a long-distance relationship. However, it didn't last. Not long after Tynesha left, Timothy's ex-girlfriend re-entered his life, and he rekindled his relationship with her. Tynesha was devastated by this betrayal, but she refused to let it hold her back. She remained focused on her ambitions and embraced the independence and opportunities that college life brought. At Texas A&M, she found herself surrounded by new friends, experiences, and possibilities. Meanwhile, Timothy's brief reconciliation with his ex-girlfriend was short-lived. He quickly realized it was a mistake and found himself missing Tynesha, desperate to win her back. He left everything behind and rushed to her college, where she was surprised by his unexpected arrival. They talked and discovered they still had feelings for each other. They decided to attempt a long-distance relationship once again. However, over time, Tynesha began to grow and change emotionally. She no longer wanted to hold on to the past, and during this period, she met Mark, a classmate her own age. Mark shared her thoughts and interests, and although a part of her heart still belonged to Timothy, she came to realize their romance was over. About 2 years later, Tynesha made a definitive decision. She decided to move on and began spending time with Mark. Their relationship started slowly, with friendship and a bit of flirting, as they enjoyed each other's company. During this time, Tynesha remained in touch with Timothy, hoping to maintain a friendship with him. In her mind, love and friendship could coexist. By March 2007, Tynesha had fully adjusted to student life. She was excited about what lay ahead and was genuinely happy. She eagerly counted the days until the spring holidays, anticipating reuniting with her friends from her hometown and attending a Beyoncé concert scheduled for March 15th in Houston. After the concert, Tynesha planned to visit South Padre Island before returning to campus. On the evening of March 14th, she and her friends prepared for the next day's event. The group of former classmates styled each other's hair, laughed until they cried, and reminisced about their school days. Tynesha planned to spend the night at her friend Lois's apartment. That evening, she called her mother to ask permission to borrow the car for the concert, and her mother happily agreed, not knowing this would be their last conversation. Tragically, she never made it to the concert. She went missing from Lois's apartment that night and stopped answering her phone. Lois grew alarmed, knowing Tynesha would never miss a Beyoncé concert. She had planned everything meticulously. When Tynesha didn't show up the next morning, March 15th, her friends panicked. Lois contacted Gail, Tynesha's mother, who had not heard from her daughter since the evening of March 14th. The family was immediately concerned, as Tynesha would never disappear without reason or leave them worried. Gail called Tynesha's friends and classmates, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. In a desperate attempt to learn more, Gail called Timothy, hoping he might know something. He admitted to speaking to Tynesha on the evening of Wednesday, March 14th, but had not seen her since. As it turned out, Wednesday was the night before the concert, meaning Timothy could have been the last person to have seen her. Unable to wait any longer, Gail decided to start her own investigation. She personally confronted Timothy, seeking answers. Although the family had liked Timothy when he and Tynesha were dating, Gail approached him with caution, sensing something she couldn't explain, an instinctive unease that grew stronger now that Tynesha was missing. Timothy explained that he had met with Tynesha on the night of March 14th, after she spent the evening with her friends at Lois's apartment. He picked her up and they went to his place. However, around 3 a.m., Tynesha received a phone call. Timothy, consumed by jealousy, assumed it was Mark, her new boyfriend, and insisted on knowing why he was calling so late. She refused to discuss her relationship with Mark and left Timothy's apartment. Between 4 and 5, she walked away alone, on foot. On March 19th, after days of no contact, Gail reported her daughter's disappearance to law enforcement. Gail provided the authorities with a detailed description of Tynesha and all the known events leading to her disappearance. Tynesha, a 19 years old, standing 156 centimeters tall and weighing 54 kilograms, had black hair, brown eyes, and distinctive tattoos on her right thigh and back. The last person to see her, Lois, reported that she was wearing a white shirt and rainbow-colored pajamas at the time. Despite her mother, Gail's, concerns, the police dismissed the situation, suggesting that, as an adult on spring break, she might have simply left without giving notice. They advised Gail to wait and check back after the weekend. However, Gail knew her daughter wouldn't just disappear without telling anyone. Tynesha had plans to attend a concert and return to her college classes. If she were going somewhere, she would have informed her family. Days passed without any updates, leaving the family to take action on their own. They distributed flyers, searched nearby areas, contacted hospitals and morgues, and spoke with Tynesha's friends and classmates, desperately hoping for any clue about her whereabouts. When classes resumed, Tynesha was still missing, raising concerns among her professors, who also tried to reach her. With each passing day, the family became more worried. Frustrated by the lack of action from authorities, the family organized a community meeting at the local Lutheran church, hoping to draw attention to Tynesha's disappearance. This effort finally gained traction when an assistant in the sheriff's office working in the missing persons department took an interest in the case. The investigation revealed Tynesha was last seen at the apartment of Timothy. When police visited the apartment building, no one answered the door. The apartment manager informed officers that his unit had been affected by a fire 2 days earlier. A neighbor also reported hearing gunshots in the forest near the apartment complex, prompting the police to bring in a canine unit to search the area. The search dogs quickly caught the scent of decay just dozens of meters from the complex, but it turned out to be the remains of a dead animal. Investigators then focused on the fire at Timothy's apartment. Neighbors had been alarmed by thick black smoke coming from the balcony of Unit 224, which lasted for hours. Firefighters were called to the scene, but Timothy refused to let them in, claiming he was simply grilling meat on several grills on his balcony and that there was no danger. By the time the firefighters arrived, the smoke had disappeared and there was no visible fire. The firefighters eventually convinced Timothy to allow them to inspect the apartment, where they discovered melted ice and pieces of meat in the bathroom. The type of meat was unclear. Since no crime had been committed, grilling meat in one's home isn't illegal. The firefighters left. Shortly afterward, a sheriff's assistant summoned Timothy to the police station for questioning. Calmly, he repeated the same story he had secretly told Gail earlier. Tynesha had left his apartment after an argument sparked by a late-night call from Mark. According to him, she slammed the door and left on foot without saying anything further. With no evidence against him, he was released. Tynesha's family continued to pray for her safe return, but no answers ever came. They were left devastated, feeling abandoned by the authorities and believing no one truly cared about their daughter and sister. The community expressed outrage at the authorities' lack of decisive action. Many believed the media prioritized cases involving missing white girls, while largely ignoring those involving black individuals. Tynesha's sister and cousin sought help from public activist Quennell Ten, a well-known figure in the black community and advocate for justice system reform. Quennell, known for his mistrust of law enforcement, became a prominent voice for families overlooked by the authorities. He promised to uncover the truth, and after his involvement, police began to take the case more seriously. investigators discovered that Tynesha had been dating a young man named Mark around the time of her disappearance and decided to question him. Initially, Mark avoided police calls, but later contacted them himself. During questioning, Mark revealed that he had traveled to South Padre Island on March 17th. The detectives found it suspicious that he left town after Tynesha went missing, but he explained that he tried to reach her before leaving and only learned about her disappearance after he arrived in South Padre. Attention then shifted to Tynesha's ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who was reportedly the last person to see her alive. Detectives began investigating Timothy thoroughly, looking into his background and speaking with his neighbors. Timothy came from a well-regarded family. His mother worked as a pharmacist, and his stepfather, who raised him after his biological father passed away when he was 2 months old, was a deacon at the Missionary Baptist Church. His mother participated in the church choir, and his younger sister was studying law at the University of Houston. His family was well respected in their community. Timothy himself was a father to a 4-year-old daughter, for whom he had full custody. Neighboring residents described him as quiet, polite, and devoted to his daughter. Though he seemed to live a relatively normal life, investigators uncovered a prior legal issue involving possession of unauthorized substances. This incident occurred well before Tynesha's disappearance. Armed with Timothy's prior written consent, police searched his apartment for clues. As soon as detectives entered Timothy's apartment, they noticed 2 alarming details. First, the smell, an odd mixture of bleach, ammonia, and another unidentifiable odor. Second, the signs of hurried renovations. The kitchen cabinets, walls, door frames, and even the inner part of the tub had been hastily painted white. Additionally, bleach stains were visible on the carpet. There was a dirty mop nearby, and a package of latex gloves was found. The sink, bathroom, and drain had been meticulously cleaned. This raised immediate suspicion of an attempted cover-up. Despite the cleanup efforts, investigators found blood traces in the bathroom. Using luminol, they confirmed the worst. The entire bathroom lit up blue, revealing blood splatters across the walls, floor, shower, toilet, and tank. The discovery prompted forensic experts to collect DNA evidence and other potential clues. While waiting for the results, detectives returned to the area to conduct further interviews and gather additional details. It wasn't long before an alarming report surfaced. According to 911 calls, residents of Timothy's apartment complex had reported seeing flames 3 days before Tynesha's mother, Gail, officially filed the missing persons report. One neighbor described noticing the strong smell of burning rubber and fearing for her home due to the intensity of the fire. Another neighbor, who regularly played video games with Timothy, recalled that he often invited friends over to grill meat. However, during this particular barbecue, he did not extend any invitations. Meanwhile, other residents reported hearing banging noises, running water, and the continuous hum of a garbage disposal coming from Timothy's unit, apartment 224. Piece by piece, a troubling picture began to form, and Timothy quickly became the prime suspect. At that time, Quinnell spoke to Tynesha and Timothy's families and learned a lot about their relationship. Initially, their bond was strong, filled with love and plans for the future. However, it didn't take long for the relationship to become unstable. There were constant arguments and problems. After Tynesha left for college, she confided to her family that she feared Timothy. His controlling nature, driven by jealousy, often crossed boundaries. Timothy's behavior became obsessive. He called Tynesha incessantly, demanding to know her whereabouts and who she spent time with. Even after their breakup, he repeatedly called her dorm neighbors to gather information about her. When they refused, he left them angry messages. Tynesha did not share the full extent of her troubles with her family, as she didn't want to alarm them. However, a close friend admitted that Timothy had once grabbed Tynesha by the neck, threatening to strangle and kill her if she ever left him. On another occasion, when Tynesha declined a ring he gave her on Valentine's Day, Timothy jokingly said he would one day kill her, grill her body, and feed it to dogs. This all occurred about a year and a half earlier. Eventually, things seemed to calm down, and Timothy stopped contacting her until February 2007. A month before the spring break, he called again. Tynesha was apprehensive, worried he wouldn't leave her in peace. She even considered not returning to her city. Despite her fears, she longed to see her family and friends. To avoid any conflict, she calmly talked to Timothy and agreed to meet him before leaving. Though she still had feelings for him, she knew their relationship had no future. Quinnell sought Timothy's side of the story, arranging a meeting at Timothy's apartment. Quinnell found him nervous, with trembling hands, darting eyes, and visible despair. Inside the apartment, Quinnell noticed luminal traces in the bathroom, left by forensic investigators. When Timothy was asked about Tynesha's fate, he hung his head and admitted that she was no longer alive. He admitted he was terrified of death and did not want to die himself. Quinnell persuaded Timothy to help bring closure to Tynesha's family. He led Quinnell to a dumpster behind an apartment building about 5 kilometers from his home. His behavior became erratic, his breathing grew heavy, and his hands started twitching. He refused to even glance at the dumpster. However, when the container's lid was opened, it was empty, as the trash had already been transported to a landfill. Despite exhaustive searches, Tynesha's remains were never recovered. Timothy was arrested and charged with her murder. Tynesha's family was devastated once more. They now knew that Tynesha was gone, but they didn't even have a chance to give her a proper goodbye or burial. While in custody, Timothy initially exercised his right to a lawyer, but later changed his mind. Alone in the interrogation room, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He confessed to the crime. According to Timothy, the night Tynesha disappeared, the two argued over her new boyfriend, Mark. Tynesha was frustrated with Timothy interfering in her life again. In the heat of the argument, she allegedly grabbed a knife from the table and swung at him, leaving a scratch on his hand. Timothy claimed he felt threatened at first, but soon became enraged. He snapped, grabbing her neck with his right hand while trying to take the knife with his left. He strangled her until she dropped the knife and collapsed onto the floor. Panicked and convinced no one would believe him, Timothy chose not to call 911. Instead, he placed Tynesha's body into a large plastic storage container and disposed of it in a dumpster, a location he later pointed out to Quinnell. By the time authorities launched their investigation, the garbage from the dumpster had already been transported to a landfill. Timothy then attempted to end his life by tying a belt around his neck and tying it to a doorknob. However, the attempt was unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the police deliberated on how to proceed in their search for Tynesha's body. The landfill spanned an enormous area, receiving several dozen tons of garbage daily. The search could take months and incur high costs, and detectives weren't even certain they would recover her remains. However, the deeper horror lay in what police uncovered next. Details Timothy had initially failed to reveal. Timothy likely would never have fully confessed if investigators hadn't dug further. Suspicious that he was withholding information, the police returned to his apartment and conducted a more thorough search of the balcony. What they discovered during this search was chilling. Experts examined the bathroom and kitchen drains, the gaps on the balcony, and the trash can. They uncovered burnt hair, small charred bone fragments, shards of teeth, and pieces of burnt skin. These items were analyzed for DNA, and the results confirmed the worst. After the murder, Timothy had placed Tynesha's body in the bathroom, disposed of it, and attempted to eliminate all traces. He burned some remains on his balcony grills and disposed of the ashes in the trash. Other body parts were destroyed using a kitchen waste shredder. He scattered additional fragments in various garbage containers. Over the course of 2 to 3 days, Timothy worked to dispose of Tynesha's body, believing that burning her remains would make identification impossible. During this time, firefighters inspecting his apartment later found pieces of what appeared to be meat in a bathtub filled with ice. These turned out to be parts of Tynesha's body. At the time, the firefighters had no idea they had stumbled upon human remains. DNA analysis later confirmed that the body fragments belonged to 19-year-old Tynesha Stewart. Timothy Shepard was then arrested and held on $250,000 bail. After discovering what had happened to her daughter, Gail, Tyncha's mother, demanded that Timothy receive the harshest punishment possible. The prosecutor was equally determined to secure a conviction, but the case nearly fell apart because of Timothy's defense attorney, Chip Lewis. Chip, a well-known lawyer with a history of high-profile cases, had once successfully argued in a previous case that body disposal does not necessarily indicate murder. Now defending Timothy, Chip sought to challenge every piece of evidence. His main argument was that Timothy's confession had been coerced and obtained under duress, claiming detectives had violated legal protocol. Had Chip succeeded, the evidence found in the apartment would have been inadmissible in court, significantly weakening the prosecution's case. Fortunately, the prosecutor was able to persuade the judge to deny the defense's request, and the trial moved forward. The trial of 28-year-old Timothy Wayne Shepard began on September 29, 2008. The prosecutor presented the horrifying details of the crime to those attending the hearings, forcing Tyncha's family to endure the pain of imagining the cruel acts inflicted upon their loved one. Throughout the trial, the defense team argued that Timothy had strangled Tyncha in self-defense and tried to downplay the brutal nature of what followed. For example, regarding a tooth fragment found in Timothy's apartment, the defense ludicrously claimed that Tyncha could have simply dropped it down the sink before her death. In response, the prosecutor countered with evidence that Timothy had used pliers to extract Tyncha's teeth to prevent identification through dental records. This claim was confirmed by forensic experts brought in as witnesses. The grim details painted a horrifying picture of the events and left little doubt about Timothy's actions. The public activist, Quinnell, also addressed the crowd, pledging to seek justice for Tyncha's family. He kept his promise by providing testimony about everything he witnessed. After 4 days of deliberations, the jury found Timothy guilty of murdering his ex-girlfriend, Tyncha. Tyncha's family and friends were overcome with emotion, while Timothy sat cold and indifferent, showing no remorse. When it came time for the verdict, he decided to make a statement in an attempt to gain sympathy from the court. Ignoring his lawyer's advice, he spoke, believing he could convince everyone that he did not deserve a harsh punishment. He expressed a desire to return to his normal life instead of spending the best years of his life in prison. However, his speech failed to evoke any pity. Ultimately, Timothy Wayne Shepard was sentenced to 99 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, the maximum penalty. While justice seemed to prevail, Tyncha's mother, Gail, blamed herself for not recognizing the danger posed by Timothy. She regretted allowing him into her home and into her daughter's life, unaware of what he was truly capable of. After losing her daughter, Gail became determined to prevent other women from suffering at the hands of abusive ex-partners. She now shares Tyncha's story and advocates for healthy relationships, urging parents to be involved in their children's lives. Gail firmly believes that looking out for the well-being of one's child is not interference, but a responsibility every parent must uphold.